Bernice appears. Okay. Good evening, Bernice. Okay. Karen, Derek, we'll begin.
Yes.
This is the regular meeting of the Princeton Zoning Board of Adjustment being held electronically via Zoom on October 25th, 2023 at 7:30 p.m. Pursuant to Section 13 of the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of the time and place of this meeting has been given by prominently posting the sunshine notice of the Princeton Zoning Board of Adjustment. Such notice has been placed on the official bulletin board at the municipal complex and by transmitting a copy of same to the Princeton Packet, Town Topics, the Times, Trentonian, and by filing a copy with the Clerk of Princeton on October 20th, 2023, and has been posted to the municipal website, www.princeton.gov. PrincetonNJ.gov/meetings. Pursuant to the extension of the ongoing state of emergency by Executive Order number 292, in accordance with the Emergency Remote Public Meetings Protocol for local public bodies to conduct a public meeting without physical attendance by members of the public. Notice that during the extension of the state of emergency, all regular and special meetings of the Princeton Zoning Board of Adjustment will be held electronically via Zoom, was transmitted to the Princeton Packet, Town Topics, the Times, and was filed with the Clerk of Princeton on the 24th day of April 2020. Such notices have been placed on the official bulletin board of the Princeton Municipal Complex and on the Princeton website and are to be maintained throughout the year. And by transmitting a copy of same to the Princeton Packet, Town Topics, the Times, Trentonian, Comcast Media, and by filing a copy thereof with the Clerk of Princeton, notices have been placed on all window doors of the municipal complex. Claudia, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Chen,
Here.
Ms. Coulson,
Here.
Mr. Davidge,
Here.
Mr. Floyd,
Here.
Mr. Shriver,
Yes.
Mr. Tenenbaum, Mr. Stein,
Here.
Ms. Donna,
Yes.
Chairman Cohen.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we have no resolutions this month. We have two applications that were carried over from last month. I believe, Karen, we've taken jurisdiction on both.
That's correct.
Okay, so the first hearing this evening will be case number Z23-392, which is 24 Randall Road, block 7403, lot 12 in the R5 zone of the former township. Derek, can you summarize your memo or read your memo, please?
Yes, sir.
Derek, I'll just swear you in first. Do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful? And I see we have the municipal arborist with us as well. There he is. So why don't we swear you in too, Mr. Saputer? That way, if you do testify, it's fine. So I'll ask you as well. Do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
I do.
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. The applicant is Oriole Homes LLC. Excuse me, they're the owner, and the applicant is Kivank Aiden. They're seeking a C1 and C2 variance to permit construction of a new single-family home on a lot in exception to the required lot area. Properties in the R5 T zone in the former Princeton Township. The subject lot is non-complying with regard to the required 21,780 square foot lot. The existing is 21,702. The property otherwise complies with the applicable bulk regulations. The applicant is proposing to construct a plus or minus 4,300 square foot new two-story colonial style single-family home, featuring a full basement, 4 full baths and a powder room, 5 bedrooms, kitchen, living room, dining room, mudroom, and a 2-car attached garage. The subject lot does not meet the required lot area. The house complies with the applicable variances. They are seeking C1 and C2 relief for the required lot area, which is 21,780, and the existing lot is 21,702. The applicant should advise if they have approached any of the adjoining properties regarding the purchase of additional lot area to cure the lot area deficiency. And that's my memo. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to address them.
Board members, any questions? Okay, who will be presenting this case? Okay,
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Ryan Kennedy from Stevens and Lee, for the applicant, tonight for 24 Randall Road. We'll have 2 witnesses, and perhaps we can move them over. Corey Piskorski is our arborist who we might call upon, and primarily we'll have testimony from Eric Ripnarian, our engineer. And while that's happening, from a housekeeping perspective, I'll note that we have provided some slides in advance that I'll, when the time comes, ask that be marked as our 1 exhibit this evening, Ms. Casey.
Mr. Kennedy, just for clarification, Oriole Homes is the owner and applicant?
That is correct. They're the owner,
Okay.
and the
And-
other name that Derek read off is the principal of Oriole
Got it.
Homes.
Okay, thank you.
He's also here if we need him. I don't think we will. So I see 1 person's come over, and while Eric is coming over, I'll just briefly summarize and thank you all for hearing us tonight. As Mr. Bridger said, most of the elements of this should be pretty simple. This is your classic C1, although I think C2 was also checked in the application form, but your classic hardship variance for an undersized lot. We'll take you through the neighborhood. There are some properties surrounding it that could potentially lend or sell some land to make this compliant, but you'll see many in the neighborhood are not compliant, and that we reached out to those neighbors and did not get interest in selling any property. We are about 70 square feet short and are proposing an otherwise compliant property or project. Claudia, I don't know if I see Eric in the attendee room, but I'm not sure if he's able to be brought over as a presenter.
Can that person raise his hand, her hand? I can't find them.
Oh, let's about halfway down the list, Eric, if you could. Oh, there we go. There we go. So Eric, if you and Corey could turn your cameras on, I'd ask that we swear you guys both in first, and we can start.
Okay, Mr. Ripnarian and Mr. Piskorski. I think your volume's off right now. You're muted. Do you swear or affirm that your testimony this evening will be truthful?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Okay, Eric, before we really start, if I could ask you to briefly give the board the benefit of your credentials and professional qualifications, so I can have you accepted as an expert here tonight.
Certainly. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the states of New Jersey and Pennsylvania. I received a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Villanova University in 1997. In 2001, I received a master's in civil engineering from the same. Since 1997, I've been employed as a civil engineer designing both residential and commercial developments, both major and minor site plans in various municipalities throughout New Jersey. I've appeared in front of this board and numerous other
Excuse me,
board.
Just
Thank you.
not to cut you short, but we'll accept you as
No.
an expert.
Mr.
in your
Chairman,
field.
you
Thank you.
feel free to cut short. Thank you. And so, Eric, you're the civil engineer for this particular project, is that correct?
Yes, I am.
All right. So with that, I'd like to, if it's all right, share my screen and we can go through our exhibits.
Certainly.
believe
Mr.
this will
Kennedy,
be-
do you know how many slides you have?
I believe it's 11. I'm sorry, 13.
Okay,
Apologies.
so all these collectively, as you asked, exhibit A1. Okay,
So Eric, if we could first start by orienting the board to where we are in Princeton. I know that blue arrow is pointed to the property, but if you could orient it, some of the roads or some of the nearby features, if you could, as to where we are.
No, certainly. So the property is located on, excuse me. The property is located on the north side of Randall Avenue. In the exhibit, as the board can see, the property is actually highlighted in blue. On either side of the property, both to the east and to the west, are fully improved existing residential dwellings, and similarly to the rear of the property is an existing residential property, a residential lot.
And I'm sure everyone on the board knows where the street is, but that in the center of the screen is the Princeton Shopping Center and Harrison Street, and this is kind of oriented behind that. Is that fair?
Correct.
Next, if we move to the next slide, this is a neighborhood map. Also the property highlighted in blue there.
Correct.
Next slide, this is like the tax map showing the former township's R5 zone. Is that correct, showing the property?
That is correct. This is the zoning map with the property shown.
Okay, now this next slide, this is a clip of the bulk table from your plans. Is that right, Eric?
Yes, it is.
All right, and so is it correct that this project and lot complies with all the bulk requirements except for lot area? Is that right?
Correct. In the R5 zone, in the township's R5 zone, 21,780 square feet is required, and the existing lot, based on the survey that my office completed, is 21,702 square feet. So the applicant is 78 square feet short of a fully compliant lot in terms of lot area. Otherwise, all of the other bulk standards are met.
And so 71,780, that's a half acre, is that right?
Yes, it is.
And is it also true that if you looked at the tax records for most of the lots in the neighborhood, including this one, it lists a half acre and someone might actually think it's a half acre when purchasing it?
That's correct. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's a half acre property.
All right. And before we leave this slide of all the other compliant bulk features for the house that's being proposed and the lot, that one on the bottom right, 17.6%, that's the impervious coverage that's allowed. So we're less than half of what would be permitted on this lot with the proposal. Is that correct?
That's correct. 36% is permitted in the zone, and the applicant is only proposing 17.5 or 17.6%.
Right. This next slide, tell me, I guess highlighted in blue, are those all the lots that the tax records indicate are exactly 1/2 acre, including our lot?
That's correct.
And the red lots are all of the lots in the neighborhood that are less than the half acre requirement. Is that correct?
Correct.
So I know you tend to draw these types of plans into this subdivision's been here for a while, but in your mind, is this sometimes a rounding error, or was something thought out here when this was put together, or perhaps just a mistake?
No, I think normally when you look at most tax maps and most older subdivision plats, typically the lot areas are listed, when they're listed in acreage, it might go to 1 decimal place, perhaps 2 decimal places. And if this property was rounded essentially to 1 decimal place, it rounds to 1/2 of an acre. And that's what I've seen in many different places, in many different municipalities. Normally, they do not list lot acre or lot area in terms of square footage. The newer tax maps would have that information, but older plats or and older maps generally do not have that information.
And so while not technically compliant by 78 feet, square feet, it is certainly in keeping with the rest of the neighborhood scheme.
That's correct.
So as always is the case, and as suggested by Mr. Bridger, we did and highlighted in yellow are the lots that are adjacent to ours that have perhaps slightly more property, or this one has slightly less. And to the extent we haven't already, I believe we had, but these are redacted copies of the letters we sent to them seeking to purchase their properties, and no one has been interested, as often is the case here. In
Mr.
selling.
Kennedy, they're redacted on the screen, but you're saying the originals or copies have been submitted to the board secretary?
That's correct, and to the extent they haven't, we will as well. But yes, I believe we did before the meeting last month. So, excuse me, moving to slide 8. This is the look for while we're only talking about the lot area of the lot, Princeton does require that we show an idea of what we're and plans for the proposed home. I know I heard before that it was fully compliant with Princeton's regulations, neighborhood character, and the other bulk requirements, but you want to just take us quickly through what's proposed and what's outlined in blue?
So certainly, what's outlined in blue is the new home that the applicant is proposing to build. This is the footprint of the house if you're looking top down on the house. The driveway will be on the left-hand side or the high side of the property. The driveway provides direct access to Randall Road. Anyone or future occupant of the home, they would turn left into the driveway or right into the driveway, depending on the direction they're traveling on Randall. They will pull into the driveway. When they are ready to leave the property, they'll back out of the garage, and then they can turn around on site and then drive towards Randall, where they will go in either direction, north or south. To the right of the home, along the frontage of Randall, is a proposed rain garden. It's a bioretention basin. And the bioretention basin is required under the township ordinance to meet the stormwater management requirements for minor development. The applicant has completed soils testing on the property at the location of the proposed basin. The soils are acceptable for groundwater recharge and for construction of a bioretention basin.
Now, Eric, we're perhaps going to hear some concern later on about some trees along the right side of this property line. And I'll represent that the applicant owner has no interest in removing or harming those trees in any way as part of this project. But I'm going to flip to the next slide here and ask you some questions about the location of the house. So initially this current location was chosen because it seemed to fit the it's approximately the same location of the current house and seems to fit the prevailing setbacks. Is that more or less why it was chosen, kind of centered and to match the other homes?
That's correct.
And I'll ask, is there room to move it further away from those trees?
Yes, we have the ability, due to the size of the property, to move the house towards the rear and towards the left of the property.
So the side setbacks in this zone are 15 feet, is that correct, Eric?
That's correct.
And originally cited, it was approximately 23 feet from the trees along the right side of the property, giving you some room to move it back. And this diagram shows perhaps where it could be moved back further away from those trees.
That's correct.
And do you understand that the applicant is perfectly willing and interested in working with the town's arborist and engineer at the time of pulling permits and finalizing the design for this home to move it further away from those trees to protect them further from any possible damage from the existing home?
Correct.
And in doing that, do you foresee any problems in dealing with stormwater on the site, or would that make it actually easier for you to deal with the stormwater on the site?
Yeah. Moving a house back into property, towards the rear of the property does make it a little bit easier. It gives us a little bit more room at the front of the property for the bioretention basin. And it also moves the home to a higher elevation, which is going to require less grading on the right-hand side of the property, which is going to be much better for the existing trees.
Got it. Thank you. This next slide, this is a rendering of the proposed home.
Yes, it is.
And the next one, I'm just going to ask you really to identify, but this is the floor plans that were proposed for the home. Do you
Correct.
understand them? I know you didn't prepare them, but you're familiar with them, and that's what we're looking at here.
Yes,
And then this is the proposed front and side elevations. Is that right?
that's correct.
And I'll note that the architect and you, I guess, in collaboration with you, have shown the height to setback ratio lines as being compliant. And as we were talking about a minute ago, this assumes the proposed location kind of centered. But I think you can see from this diagram that there is plenty of room in height to setback, just the way the home is designed, to shift it to the left without interfering with the height to setback ratio. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right. Well, thank you, Eric. Before we go to our arborist, I'd happy to have our engineer answer any questions that the board or your professionals or anyone may have.
One question, is there a basement in the house?
Yes, there is.
Currently, are you planning on opening it to grade in the back?
No, the back of the property is higher than the front.
Okay.
So the basement will not, there's no walkout basement.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Eric. I guess if there's no other questions, I'd like to move to Corey, our arborist, next, and I'm going to shift back a few slides while I do that. But Corey, thank you for joining us tonight. If you could briefly, I know you're an ISA certified arborist, but if you could explain to the board what you do and who you are and your involvement here with this project.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. I work as a sales consultant, certified international arborist for Princeton Tree Care, where we do disease diagnosis on trees, tree treatment, tree rejuvenation, tree restoration, tree root barrier protection, tree planting. And we commonly work in Princeton and Hopewell and all the surrounding towns. So I've been in the industry for about 12 years now.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to have, I hope Corey accepted as a expert in tree management or as an arborist.
That's fine.
Thank you. So Corey, briefly, I know you've been to the site and looked at this, and perhaps just to foreshadow what the board may possibly hear, but there are a series of trees along the right side of this property. I don't know if you can see my mouse here, but I want to just describe those briefly and say what's there at the site.
It's an elder row of spruce trees, and they are roughly about, I'd say, 50 to 75 years old. I don't have the exact diameter breast height of each of them, but they're pretty evenly spaced. I'd say they all max out at around 68 to 75 feet, and they are in moderately, in great condition.
All right, and as part of, and you're a member of the project team here and would be involved going forward during construction to assist with the tree protection plan and I'll say security and management of these trees while construction happens. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And the diagram I have here is the site plan kind of, but with shown that the home shifted away further from those trees. Can you just generally tell us what you think is that I don't mean to be oversimplified, but is that something that will assist with the health of these trees comparatively, and what other suggestions do you understand that the property owner is willing to make in devising the plan with the arborist and engineer
Yeah, I think it would definitely be beneficial to move it back a little bit, and just give a little bit more room, for that tree's critical root zone and the separation to, the construction activity versus their critical root zone. We had planned to put in a root protection barrier around the critical root zone so that there's, obvious barriers on what can be, driven over and what can't be in that general area. I had recommended deep root soil health injections to kind of fluff up the soil to, even rejuvenate it better of its micro macronutrients that may be lacking right now. We're going to simultaneously do that with hydrotane, which is a really great, all natural organic, additive to deep root soil health injection that's going to aid in the, water retention in that area and assist the roots in times of drought stress. And then we were going to top dress with, an evergreen mulch, just to enhance, the decompositional layers on the top grade of the soil upon completion.
Now, the plan that we're looking at here that shows some kind of line around those trees, that's not something that you helped prepare. That's just perhaps some engineering plans that were done prior to your involvement. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
That's right. But going forward, when compliance plans are made and worked out with the township staff, you would be involved to make sure that those the suggestions that you make and the tree protection areas that you feel are appropriate would be implemented by you, and then inserted into future plans. Is that right?
Yes, sir. It'd be my privilege and honor. And I would be there before anything starts and throughout the whole process and then upon completion.
Right. I'll also note there's a few trees, including a cherry tree in the front here that has an X on it. Your understanding, though, is that while the applicant had received a permit to remove that tree, that's not their intention to. They were are going to attempt to keep that tree in place. Is that correct?
Last I spoke to him, yes, sir.
Well, thank you. With that, I'm happy to have our arborist. She's not going to go anywhere. Maybe we'll need him a bit later, but answer any questions that the board or your professionals may have.
Mr. Kennedy,
Board
just for
any-
clarification, are you suggesting a specific distance for the house to be moved over?
Not a specific one. There's because there's quite a window here with none of which would require variances. There's about 8 feet from the initial suggested site to the left, between that and the setback line at 15. That there's kind of ample room to find the right location here that best protects the trees. Same with the moving it back. We could propose one specifically, but I'll be honest, it at this point might be arbitrary, and we really would prefer that, since no variances are needed for any of those distances, that be allowed to be worked out with engineering staff and the arborist to make sure that it's the right balance of trying to match, while no variance is needed, the other setbacks in the neighborhood, and protecting the tree.
Okay. Thank you.
Board members, any questions of the arborist? Okay, Mr. Kennedy, proceed.
All right. Well, thank you. Those are our 2 witnesses. Just in summary, while we did add a little extra here because we heard some concerns from the neighboring property owners about those trees, and just wanted to make it absolutely clear that it's our intention to do what we can, including moving the house, adding new protection measures. And while it's not for this board, you couldn't grant us relief from the tree ordinance if we asked. That's not part of this process. But we wanted to make it clear that we wanted to work and make sure that we can do that. And aside from that, we're in your classic C1 variance, and there's a bit of a topping to it, a little extra flavor this evening. But at the end of the day, what this board is being asked to look at is whether this undersized lot is in the true C1 fashion, warrants a variance. I'm sure you all heard last week the direction, and I hope this is the case, though it might put me out of a job, that these types of applications be able to be done administratively, like it would be in the borough under the code now. I know it's not a situation where anyone is looking to purchase this property or make it unusable. We did go on and ask send letters out and try to purchase the other lands, but that is almost never something that makes any kind of sense. But we do go through that effort. Again, this is we think your classic C1 hardship for an undersized lot. Just wanted to show that extra effort to make sure that the board understands and staff understands that we are, this is an applicant that is ready and willing to do a whole series of things to make sure that those trees are protected. Well, that's not specifically the purview of this board. We want to make that absolutely clear. So thank you so much.
Mr. Kennedy, just for clarification, the letters that you sent out to neighbors certified, did you get no response or?
That is correct. No response.
No response. Okay.
One of the
yeah.
neighbors had retained an attorney at one point that did discuss some things with me on other related issues, but no response on the purchase offers.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, board members, any questions before we go to the public portion of the hearing? Okay, Mr. Kennedy, you want to say anything else before we open this up to the public?
No, thank you so much.
Okay, hearing none, we'll open it up to the public. Claudia, has anybody indicated their desire to speak on this application?
Do you want to tell the public to raise their hand?
Okay, yes, anyone in the public who would like to speak, indicate that by checking the raise your hands button at the bottom of the screen. Doesn't appear anything's come up.
These 5 hands up so far.
Okay, I don't see anybody, Claudia, do you?
If you go to the attendees file, there are 5 hands.
Oh, there are.
For some
Yeah.
reason, it's not coming across to our screen.
Okay,
Driver, can you try to move him? It's telling me my move failed.
Well, wait, we see one person, Claudia.
Okay.
Wait.
Okay, I'll
I
keep
just
on
saw
trying.
I saw Mr. Alexander and then I don't know where he went. Oh, here he is. Great. Okay. So you've got him moved over. You have anybody else? Okay.
Bobby, you want me to try to move a couple?
Well,
If
no, I
you
see, I
can.
see people now. Mr. Pesnell, Mr. Strauss, Mr. Taffet. All right, well, if we include Mr. Alexander, then that's 5. You've moved over 5 now.
Did she say Lamana?
Yes, Mike, I'm sorry, yes, Mr. Lamana.
okay, Claudia, select someone and move them over. Or open them up.
Well, Steve, I think everybody's, well, all right. I was gonna say, I thought everybody was moved over now. but-
Even Alexander's been unmuted. He could speak.
Okay,
Good evening.
Mr. Alexander, we're just going to ask you, we're going to swear you in. If you're comfortable giving us your address, please do so. First, I'll swear you in. Do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
I do.
All righty. And if you're comfortable giving us your address, could you tell us what that is?
Sure. I live at 12 Randall Road.
All right.
Which
Now, I
is
know,
the-
Mr. Alexander, you sent a letter, which I don't know if you want the board to consider that. We're going to have to ask you to go through it, or if you're going to testify today, then we will have your testimony.
I can testify to the content of the letter. I
That's
also
fine.
submitted 2 drawings,
All right.
2 ground
And-
plan PDFs that I would like to
Present.
present.
Okay. let's see, can you share your screen or can
I can.
Claudia, can you call them up for Mr. Alexander? So,
Can you see my screen here?
yep, we
Okay.
can.
So my name's Evan Alexander. My family lives at 12 Randall Road. We're in lot 1, which is the lot immediately to the west of the proposed site that we're talking about. The submitted plans from the developer have omitted a fair amount of trees on the site. So I've indicated them here in red. So you can see on both the east side and on the west side, there are trees drawn that were never made it onto the original plans. I've shown where the trees are and then what kind of a standard considered root base would be based on tree diameter at chest height times 1.5 feet. So that's the larger circles that you're seeing. The red are the ones that I've added that exist on the site. The blue are the circles that are on the drawings already. So I think for us, the bigger question than the house positioning is more about the grading work that's happening around it. You can see the series of contour lines all around the house. So there is going to be, in some areas, a 20-degree kind of grade change that is indicated on these plans as leading right up to our property and to 32 Randall, the property on the other side of it. And that grading changing definitely impedes into existing tree root structures and systems. So we've been given the plans and we've seen elevation of the house, but we have no indication of what the kind of grade work and change right up to the property lines is going to be. And as drawn, it's indicated as going into existing trees. Some of them are trees on my property and on the opposite side property, but the diameter of the root systems potentially is crossing over the property line and into the grading. So you can see, I know as of tonight, I heard that we're talking about potentially moving back and to the left. You can see there is a tree in the back to the left that kind of falls within that line. So I feel like we don't have all the information on the realities of the site. And I'm asking the board to just consider that as you think about this application tonight.
Mr. Alexander, a couple questions for you. Did you take the photos that we see now?
I did.
On the screen? All righty. And if I'm understanding your proposed exhibit, you took the developer's drawing, and then what did you add to it or what did you highlight on it?
So I took the developer's drawing in, made sure it was to scale. I measured the existing trees on site, and then I overlaid them onto the existing developer plan. I have two versions of this. One which shows the current house as it is, the existing property that's on there right now. So this is the drawing from the existing. And so you can see like the grade changes here as they exist. And then I have another drawing showing the proposed grade changing around the kind of perimeter and backside of the proposed house. And then how this impacts existing trees.
All righty, so we can mark this objector exhibits 1 and 2, and then does the board want to accept this then? Since you've heard testimony now from Mr. Alexander.
Well, I mean, we really, this is the first time we've seen it,
Right.
so it's hard to accept or not accept it without review, I would ask the owner applicant to respond to this.
Well, do you want to go through, okay, do you want to go through all the objector testimony? Because I believe there are other comments still to
Okay.
be made.
We can do that. Let's do that and then we'll
All right.
discuss them.
Okay. Mr. Alexander, did you want to add anything else?
I think that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time, everybody.
Okay.
Okay, Claudia, can you bring the next person in?
I think that's Michael Strauss.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Strauss, we're going to ask you to be sworn in, and also, if you're comfortable, please give us your address. So first, do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
I do.
Thank you. And then if you're comfortable, can you give us your address, please?
So I'm speaking, this is Michael Strauss speaking on behalf of myself and my wife, Sophia, who's also here. We live at 77 Randall Road. We're just down the street, as it were.
Mrs. Strauss, do you want to testify too, or?
I just wanted to give a comment,
Okay, that's fine.
if that's appropriate.
Thank
The two of us have a general concern that the size of the house that would be built would be out of character with the neighborhood. The square footage seems to be considerably larger than many of the houses, especially those in narrow lots like this one has, and we're concerned about the overall appearance that it would give on Randall Road. We share the concerns that I think are going to be discussed as well about the trees and the impact on the trees, both on the existing properties and the neighboring properties. So I just wanted to register our concern about those issues.
Okay, the house actually conforms to the allowable size, just for informational purposes.
We understand.
Okay.
But we remain concerned.
That's fine. Thank you. Is there anything else that you want to bring up?
Nope, that's all.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Okay, Claudia, next person.
Mr. Taffa, do you want to speak?
Hi, this is Ilona Harris. And I was actually gonna request, we do have some comments, but we would appreciate if Mr. Lamanna, an arborist who we hired to consult about these issues, could speak first.
Okay, and Ms. Harrison, Mr. Taffet, if you're comfortable, could you give us your address, please?
32 Randall.
Alrighty, and I'm going to swear you in now. That way, if you
Sure.
choose to make comments later, that's fine. Do you both swear or affirm any testimony you give this evening will be truthful?
Yes.
Yes.
Alrighty. And Steve, is that acceptable to the board? I see Mr. Lamonti's got his hands raised.
Certainly not a problem at all.
Alrighty. Can we get Mr. Lamanna on the screen then?
This is Mike Lamanna. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you, but we can't see you, Mr. Lamanna.
Yeah,
Can
I
you-
apologize for that. That might be on my end.
Okay. Is there anything you think you can do on your end? Because since we're operating via Zoom, we need to see everyone on a screen. So
Ah, there we go. There we go.
there you
That
go.
is
Great. Okay.
unfortunately for you, that is me.
All right. Mr. Lamanna, if you'd raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm any testimony you give this evening will be truthful?
I do.
Alrighty. And I understand that there is a report that you would like to present. So it may be helpful to the board to first understand your qualifications And then, if you want to present your report, the board would have a background for it then.
Absolutely. So thank you for making time for me. I'll make this as quick as I can. My name is Michael Lamanna. I am the owner and founder of a company called Heartwood Consulting Services, which does business as Lamanna Consulting Foresters. My business address is 309 Fellowship Road, Suite 200 in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, 08054. I am a consulting forester and consulting arborist. I've been practicing in New Jersey for more than 25 years. I am a New Jersey licensed tree expert. I am a board certified master arborist with the ISA, the same society that Mr. Piskorski is a member of. I'm also a registered consulting arborist and the secretary of the American Society of Consulting Arborists. I'm a certified forester with the Society of American Foresters, and I'm sure there's a couple of others in there.
We will accept you as an expert in your field.
Okay, and I think actually of the most relevance is I was the township forester under contract for Toms River Township for about 14 years or so, and I've also done some a fair amount of municipal consulting on the other side of this screen. So I feel the pain you're all going through here. I was engaged by Mr. Taffet and Ms. Harris to look at the issue of the trees regarding the concerns that have already been raised by others this evening. And what I was asked to do was to look at the proposed plan specifically regarding the location of the house and the location of proposed grading, evaluate the existing conditions of the trees that are there and come up with an opinion about whether the plan was reasonably foreseeable as retaining the trees and whether it was consistent with the municipal ordinances regarding the trees. And that's what I did. And so to that assignment, I wrote a report that's dated October 20, 2023. It's the only report I've written in this matter. And I'm not sure if it has been submitted to the municipality yet. Someone is speaking at the same time.
Yeah, I know.
Sure
I'm
you're
not
getting
sure. We're kind of getting, yeah.
It's Janet Stern seems to be lighting up, whoever that is.
Okay, but looks like that's muted now. I'm seeing that on the screen.
I
So,
apologize.
I do, Claudia, Mr. Lamanna's report was posted, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Okay, all righty.
Mr. Lamanna can share his screen if he wants.
That's true. So I'm assuming Ms. Harris and Mr. Taffet that you would like to submit this report as an exhibit. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so why don't we call this exhibit objector 3? And Mr. Lamanna, for the benefit of the board, then perhaps you could go through the report.
Absolutely. Would you prefer that I shared my screen? I'm happy to do that.
Steve, would the board like that?
You might as well. Yes,
Okay.
if we have it, let's look at it.
Okay, it's brief. So let me try. Let me know if you all can see this.
Okay, there you go.
So let's see if I can get this. Darn it. Come on. There we go. All right. Is that reasonably seeable to everyone?
It is.
Okay. So my report is only 6 pages. And the data portion of my report begins on my page 2, where I have a table. It's the only table in the report. And similar to what I believe Evan Alexander was saying a moment ago, there are other trees on the property that are not in the called out specifically in the proposed plan. And that's relevant because the proposed activities, the grading and the house construction, are as likely to impinge on some of the trees that are shown on the proposed plan, as well as some that are not shown. So there's simply some data missing, I think, on that plan before an actual vetting of the application with regard to trees can be looked at. That all said, I found 10 trees along the property line shared with the Taffet and Harris property with the proposed property, going from front to back. Many of these are Norway spruces, as the other arborist had mentioned. There are a couple of non-Norway spruces there. And in short, these trees are mostly in good to very good condition. Some of them are quite large. I think most concerning are the largest Norway spruce trees. These range from 20-ish, 24, 25 inches in trunk diameter at DBH, fairly large for a Norway spruce in Princeton, up to a very large pin oak. That's the trunk of which is almost all on the Harris and Taffet property. So quite big.
Mrs. Stern, could you please? Thank you.
Okay. And then what I did was I plotted these trees, and this is all approximate. This was all just off tax assessor tax maps or so. I plotted them approximately, and I looked at the 5 that were most likely to be impinged upon by the proposed activity. So this photograph is publicly available aerial coming from 2018, if I recall. Property lines are just tax lines. They are not survey lines. That's not the point. It's just a schematic documentation. And so here on this photograph, what you see is the spread of these trees. These are the trees at issue. And frankly, they get, and there's a shadow effect, but get very close to the existing house on the subject property here, and not so close to the Taffet Harris house over here. Issue is that this line of trees are all uphill of the Taffet home, which is slightly downhill. So one of my concerns here is that root disturbance on this side where I'm moving the cursor, whether that be loss from compaction or the cutting of the roots, is going to destabilize or is reasonably likely to destabilize the trees, making them more likely to fail, possibly more likely to fall over in the direction of the Taffet home, this sort of thing. And we know this. We know that this happens, and that's why specifically things like tree protection zones are called out in the municipal ordinance, which is frankly a pretty good ordinance. So what I found, just to sum this up pretty quickly here, what I found and I concluded was that these trees appear to occur within 25 feet of the existing home on the proposed lot. Okay, so essentially most of the root zone of the trees that would almost certainly be protected under a reasonable application of the municipal tree protection zone rule itself is going to have to be impacted in some way by the construction of the house and the deconstruction of the present house or so. So the applicant's presentation whereby they would consider moving the house away from some of these existing trees to maybe more thoughtfully try to preserve them, I think that's a wonderful step. The other thing, to sum this up, the other thing that concerns me kind of even more, though, is the amount of grading. And this is also what I think Mr. Alexander pointed out, is that we're looking at anywhere from 1 to 3, possibly 4 feet of cuts and fills. And I understand that that derives from the stormwater rules and that a retention basin has to go in. And I cannot speak to those engineering issues, but what I can speak to is this. If we get into the business of doing cuts and fills of 1 to 3 foot in depth on a line of maturing spruce trees like this, I'm pretty sure every arborist is going to agree that's certainly going to have a deleterious effect on these trees. So my concern about maintaining these trees is now really driven as much by the regrading and the stormwater basin and the proposed rain garden that's going in as it is about the position and method by which the house is going to be built. So without being any more long-winded than that, I will, I guess I'll ask the board if you have any questions of me.
I don't have questions of you. Board members, do you have questions? Okay, we have none. Okay. Do we have anyone else in the audience?
I do have a question. I asked earlier, but I had not unmuted myself. Are there 12 trees that were not on the original plan that you have identified? 10 or 12? How many?
I apologize that I can't answer that question directly because I only looked at the one property line. I found, actually, that's a really good question. I found 10 trees existing from front to back on the one property line that I was engaged to look at. I actually think that Mr. Alexander might be able to speak more clearly about that because it seems that he went out there and looked at the entirety of the property perimeter.
All right. We'll come back to Mr. Alexander when we go through all the questions.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So what would be considered, is there a safe amount of regrading that can be done within the zones that we're talking about? I see somewhere that it says the roots are 18 to 24, within 18 to 24 inches.
So is there a safe amount of cuts and fills that can be done? It is easier to fill over roots and not have a deleterious effect than it is to cut down into soil and not have a deleterious effect. Where we're cutting is going to require, where soil needs to be cut is going to take a fair amount of design expertise if primacy is going to be placed upon the maintenance of these trees. The short answer is, I don't know. I can't answer that question to you about the safe amount that would be allowed. It's something that would need to be determined in the field based upon the actual locations of the roots. But unfortunately, and again, I think the other arborists won't disagree, one of the vexatious pieces of this is that spruces generally have very shallow root systems. They carry the bulk of their root biomass higher up, closer to the surface, complicating sometimes these tree protection measures.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, Eve, did you have any more questions?
You're muted, Eve.
I
You're
know,
muted.
I know. Sorry, for some reason, it only works in one spot on my. So I just was curious to know, I guess the other question would be why weren't these trees on the original? But for starters, I'd just be curious to know how many trees. And I'm assuming that there seem to be some trees that were on the line or maybe on the other side, but the roots would be, so I don't know how much that figures into what we would be able to vote on or judge, but
Okay.
how many, I guess my first question was how many trees were not on the original drawing that we're now talking about?
We'll get that answered.
I'm a little just questioning. There's a discussion about possibly moving the house back into the left. And the arborist that just spoke, Lamana said that, that would be potentially advantageous, but, we don't quite know what is the overall impact if they were to move it back into the left. And is there less grading that could be accomplished on the property that would cause a much less deleterious effect on these trees if the house was moved and also grading was diminished?
Okay. Okay. Jim, any other questions?
No.
Thank you. Claudia, do we have one more person that's indicated they want to speak?
Janice Stern wants to speak.
Okay. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can't
Okay.
see you though.
Yeah, and the reason that there was all that bevy of activity is because I just lost my camera.
Oh.
I can't get the camera to work. Can I still speak?
Karen?
Well, ordinarily, we want to see everyone because we're operating via Zoom. So it's that's usually what we've said to folks, that we need to be able to see you. Because we're placing you under oath, but it's mainly because we are not in person. So without seeing you, it's difficult for the board to assess. If you have more time, do you think we can come back to you then? Do you think you'll have your video back then?
I'm gonna have to, I guess, get out and try all over. It's not working. Yeah.
All right, well, I think the board is going to be taking some more testimony, and I understand they have questions. So you want to try to log out and come back in again. And then Claudia, when you see Ms. Stern come back, perhaps you can move her over then from attendee to participant.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, Claudia, are there any other people in the public who would like to speak?
On top, on the left.
Okay, that was it.
Arrow.
All right.
No, wait. I see Mr. Pesnell.
No.
Here he is.
Okay,
Okay. Mr. Pesnell, we're
Good
gonna.
evening.
Good evening. We're gonna swear you in.
Sure,
If you're comfortable, can you give us your address, please?
sure. Good evening. My name is Aaron Pesnell. I'm from 25 Monroe Lane. I'm directly behind 24 Randall. Our backyards are next to each other's.
Alrighty, and we're just gonna ask you, do you swear or affirm that your testimony this evening will be truthful?
I do.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening. I am just here as just to express my concerns as a father of 2 young children around the release of environmental hazards like lead and asbestos during the demolition of the construction project, and just gain clarity on what engineering measures will be taken to ensure the prevention of their release. I don't know if anyone wants to fill that, but if not, like for instance, will you be complying with EPA standards like national emission standards for hazardous air pollutants for asbestos? Other applicable governmental regulations?
well, one thing, excuse me for interrupting, but one thing that would be relevant, was there a phase 1 study or any environmental assessment done of the existing home and contents?
Would you like to stay? I could try to get an answer for that now, or would you like to wait? We had been kind of
No,
holding to answer
I'm
the
just
question.
asking the question. We can
Okay.
pick that up again later. All right, I'm sorry, if you'd like to continue with your questions.
Well, certainly that stands. It sounds like we'll be awaiting an answer for that initial survey, and it's my understanding that according to those regulations, that they do require inspection to identify, for instance, asbestos containing materials before demolition. And I'm just wondering if that is a requirement, if that would be something that would be followed as part of the demolition process in this case, given the age of the home and the strong possibility that lead and asbestos would be contained in that home.
Okay.
Eric, is this something that the engineering staff would address?
There is a demolition application that has some involvement with engineering, but the primary responsibility is with the building code, the construction code officials. So they'll have to see if there is asbestos. It will have to be disposed of in accordance with state regulations.
So based on that, is there a required inspection that's part of that?
I'm not the construction official, unfortunately, but that is my understanding that they do that on a regular basis. It comes up quite often with houses of this period. So,
okay. I do appreciate that this is zoning and perhaps.
No, it's a good question.
Maybe I could say that I'm trying to educate myself in the process. And is there another forum like this for construction where those discrete questions or exactly what formalities do take place can be asked?
Well, this is the only forum that will be a public discussion. If you do have questions regarding any inspections, I would suggest you contact the building department and discuss it with them and find out exactly what their procedures would be.
I see. May I ask if any testing has been performed to date, whether it was voluntary or by regulation?
Mr. Kennedy?
I can represent that in the owner's diligence that they're not aware of any lead paint or asbestos in this property at the moment. They also happy to represent that they too go through all of the processes with the building department and demolition, which are quite extensive. And to the extent any of those elements are required, whether it be EPA lead safe contractors in the demo, if it is lead paint or I like Derek, I'm a land use person and don't know all of these, but ultimately the response is that they completely intend to follow all of the rules as are required for the demolition or construction.
I appreciate that. And then let me just to clarify, not to your understanding, understood. Is that by testing that's been performed and come back negative, or just understanding by visualization?
I'll see if I get as we're finished answer questions. I can we don't have the owners here. I haven't brought them on yet. These I do understand these have not been tested, but that is kind of customary, not too necessarily during diligence. Usually the demolition contractors, if they see something, would raise something as part of that process, and they're not specifically aware of that. And
What's the age of the home? What's the age of the existing home?
I'll ask if our engineer or maybe I should bring the applicant
Yeah,
on.
maybe Mr. Kennedy that way. Might
I
be
mean, I will say that
easier.
these I'm happy to try to answer as many things as we can. Demolition of this home would be completely as of right and not involve a variance or this board. So I don't want to get too sidetracked here because we do have to whatever the rules are with the municipality and for demolition. We will certainly comply with.
We're not questioning your applicant's ability to demolish the home. We're just questioning if studies were done to ascertain if there's any lead-based paint or materials or asbestos-containing materials that were identified.
They have not. I'll represent that for the record that they've not done those types of tests.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And just to follow up, it sounds like the relevant party there from the municipal side is the construction department.
Yes, it is.
For further questioning.
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you very much all for your time.
And just one quick follow-up from tax records, we believe it was 1957.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Of an age where those would be concerns.
I think 55 was the lead-based paint situation. Asbestos, I believe, was later. I'm not sure. But I think it's something that would be well served if you brought it up to the building department, building officials.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Is there anything else before we move on?
Steve, I think we see Miss Stern has her hand raised, so we'll see.
Okay.
You can
Let's see
get
if
her
we see her.
video and running.
Okay. Ms. Stern, are you,
I'm sorry, I guess I can't be seen still. I can't fix this.
okay? Sorry about that.
She could try her telephone, if she wants to call in, right?
Well, we need to see her.
Yeah, I mean, Derek, that's what we've told.
Yeah.
But that's the position and policy the
understand.
board has, that we need to see people.
Well,
Um,
okay,
Well, you could use a cell phone.
I think I'm on now.
We can hear you, we still can't see you.
Okay. I'll keep trying. Sorry.
Okay. We'll be talking for a few more minutes, so if you're able to get your camera to work or a camera to work, indicate again raise your hand and we'll come back to you. Okay, Claudia, is there anyone else in the audience wants to comment on this?
Mr. Taffet again,
Okay,
you're muted.
Hi, sorry. I guess I just have a few comments. Some of them are kind of to contextualize our concerns. David contacted the applicant in March, a couple of months before he closed on the property, to express our concern about the trees. And then several times thereafter, we got sort of empty reassurances that they cared about the trees and thought that they were a really nice feature of the property. So we were alarmed when we saw the proposal, which seemed to disregard any concern for the trees and also the tree protection ordinance. And while the moving of the house back perhaps would be an improvement, I think we probably would need to see the exact proposal. And I really would like to have Mr. Lamanna be able to review it and, give us some indication that in fact he thinks the trees could be spared. These were trees that were planted year by year as Christmas trees by the previous owners of our house, and have some meaning because of that. And also, our trees that we were scared that they'll fall on our house, but we also enjoy the privacy they give us, the shade in the summer. Their habitat at this point for a lot of animals who've been displaced by all the, staggering number of trees that have come down in the area lately. So, I guess I also just want to say, I'm not convinced. They moved the house, the grading might still be a problem, the regrading, but also several weeks ago, I guess, in order to test the soil for the bioretention basin, the applicant had heavy machinery come in, drive over the tree roots that we've been discussing, and dig down, damaging, I think it's in Mr. Lamanna's report,
Tree number 1.
damaging the roots already of tree number 1. So I feel like at this point, if you're inclined to approve either this proposal or some future version of this proposal, we would really appreciate having some conditions attached to make sure that they adhere to the tree protection ordinance strictly and not loosely, so that we can feel safe in the house, and hopefully preserve these trees. We also, I think, to that end, especially since one of the tree roots was already damaged, I don't know if this is something that you do, but we were thinking that it might be reasonable to have some money put in escrow, since frequently, as I've learned through this whole process, when tree roots are damaged, the actual effect of the damage doesn't become evident until years later. So were the trees, you know, damaged and then have to be removed and new trees planted, you know, it could take like 8 years for that to become clear. Yeah, I mean, I guess the last thing I just want to say is that the trees also provide, you know, we have a big water management problem on Randall Road. Our property in particular, I don't know if any of you saw the video that David uploaded of water, but when it rains heavily, since we're on the downhill side, water comes off of 24 and flows down our hill. And the trees provide a lot of, you know, help in erosion control and soil stabilization. So yeah, we're really quite worried and not wholly reassured by this very recent update to their plan. Thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, Claudia, anyone else?
Janet Stern is back on.
Okay, let's try again.
Can you see me?
Okay, we can see you.
Okay, great. I'm so sorry. 3 devices.
Okay,
Ms. Stern, we're going to swear you in, and if you're comfortable, if you would give us your address.
Yes, Janet Stern, 45 Monroe Lane.
Alrighty, and do you swear or
I
affirm
do
that any
swear.
testimony you give will be truthful? Thank you.
I do, and I just wanted to say initially that I am on the Shade Tree Commission, but I do not represent or speak for the commission in any way tonight. I'm here as a neighbor who lives on the street behind, not as a Shade Tree Commission member, though I do wish to focus remarks on the trees. I'm very, very glad that the owner is considering moving the house so that the trees will be protected. As Mr. Lamanna said, however, the critical root zones of those trees are huge. So what I want to draw attention to, I was going to talk about the value of needles and conifers in terms of air pollution, filtering, and so forth. But I think that the zoning board knows all of that and appreciates that. And we hope that the owner does too. And also the stands, a tree that's in a stand like that is much more protected and much more beneficial than trees that are not in stands. And all the benefits of trees that we've all come to know about are even amplified and multiplied in groves and stands like this. So I'm not going to dwell on that. But what I did want to say was that I walked this site with the owners of 32 Randall, who live next door. And I couldn't help but think about how much air this stand of conifers might have filtered and purified during the smoke from the Canadian forest fires this summer. That's what stands of trees do. And losing these trees because of haphazard or insufficient protection would only exacerbate the screening and pollution filtering that we in this neighborhood have lost. 380 trees on the corner of Terhune and Harrison were removed this year, and there are another 80 coming down immediately adjacent to our neighborhood. Can this house even be built without damaging these trees? Those critical root zones are pretty large. I don't know about whether it can be, but the tree protection ordinance, which is just as important in this case as the trees and shrubs ordinance, the rest of the ordinance, it's an ordinance, it's law, it's provisions, including exactly what the fence should be made of, the fences, and how to calculate the critical root zone of each tree. These are the central focuses of the tree protection ordinance. for example, it says the fence required by this section shall be a 4-foot tall wooden slat snow fence with 5-strand metal wire installed with metal posts at intervals of 6 feet. Not a silt fence, not a piece of tapestry hanging. This is very, very precise in the tree protection ordinance. And it really must be enforced. And then finally, the cherry tree, which to echo what Ms. Harris said, we've been told things that nothing that the builder has to abide by, but we have been promised things, and of course we're beginning to wonder, can we really trust everything that they say they're going to do? This is a gorgeous, cherished, huge, multi-stem tree. And if it were mine, I certainly wouldn't remove it. And it's also on a downward slope near the street, which, as you know, already overflows with too much stormwater. And I wouldn't want to interfere with those well-established root systems in that particular location. It too needs to be preserved and protected, and it'll come down only because this home is too big for the lot. Thank you very much. And I am just wanted to reiterate that please regard the tree protection ordinance. That's the ordinance we're talking about here.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. All right, Claudia, anyone else?
Mr. Alexander is back on.
Okay, Mr. Alexander.
Hi, I just wanted to circle back to Ms. Coulson's question about number of trees. Just to clarify, I added 14 trees to the existing drawings. Of those, 9 of them fall inside of the actual property lines of the lot we're talking about. 5 of them are off-site, either on my property or on the Harris Taffet property, but the root zone would indicate that it does cross the property line into proposed grading areas. And of those 14, 3 of them are along the edge of the north border, which seems to be far away from any construction or grading zone that we're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that. I try to do my best in counting, but thanks for the.
That's okay. It's
for the
9 on the
accuracy.
site.
Appreciate that.
Okay, Claudia, anyone else indicated they'd like to speak?
There are no more hands.
Okay, so I will close the public portion of the hearing. I'd like to ask our arborist, just for informational purposes, and I'm not advocating this, how many trees is the applicant legally allowed to take out on his property?
So on Taylor Saputo, municipal arborist, licensed tree expert with Princeton Municipality. As per the ordinance, trees that lie on private property can be removed, as per our municipal attorney, as they see fit for their property. Now, if the trees are in good condition, viable condition, they are held to a standard of replanting based off the size, DBH, diameter of breast height. It could be 1 tree, 2 tree, 3 trees, or 4 trees that are required per that tree that's being removed. Now, if the trees are diseased, dead, or uprooted, etc., then as per the ordinance, they would be exempt from replacement. But as per our municipal attorney, trees that lie on private property, now, unless they are a heritage tree, a tree of significance, a historical tree, historical value, they could possibly be held to a higher standard. But for the most part, in my experience, they're all eligible to be removed in the event they require a replacement plan.
Okay, they're eligible to be removed, but they may require replacement planning. And that determination would be made by you?
Yeah, based off of the DBH for DBH, diameter, breast height, the size of the tree. So I go out pending or prior to removal just to measure to verify. Typically in single family development, they are on the site plan. The DBHs are often accurate, but I do double check just to make sure that the measurements do add up.
Okay, so there is some monitoring then that the township or the municipality will do. Good. Mr. Kennedy, I think since the trees obviously are a very big issue, do you want to have the applicant, the engineer, the arborist comment on this?
Oh, absolutely, Mr. Chairman. And I'll ask that Corey and Eric come back with on video and a few just initial comments, though. You know, the applicant is very interested in doing what it takes to protect these trees. I hope that was made clear. To the extent it wasn't, I'm going to say it again, as your arborist said, that, you know, technically, I guess some of these trees could, you know, on the property come down by permit. That's not what we want to do. And I'll say there was some question about the number of trees on the map, and I've been looking at the checklist for the zoning applications. You know, showing the trees isn't even technically a requirement, and some of the trees that were shown on there was kind of a budgeting exercise, particularly with the cherry tree or some in the front that were being considered for removal, so that there could be an understanding of, you know, what that actually would look like and how to draw some of the protection areas, not as any kind of exercise in, I don't know, hiding trees or anything like that, because these are all subject to the ordinance. And this board, even if we wanted to ask, and we don't, for relief from the tree protection ordinance, this board could not grant that. So when we talk about the discrepancy, I guess, from, you know, from the plans, I want to put it in that context, that the plans weren't really intended to show the trees for the purpose of the development. That's something that, like if no variance was required, you know, happens administratively between the applicant, engineering, and the arborist staff, kind of at the time of finalization of the construction and building plans. Now, having said that, we hear what everyone's saying, and we kind of think the same thing too. So I'd like to have first Eric talk a bit about, particularly with our flexibility in relocating the house. While that will likely take the house beyond, from a left to right perspective, the footprint of the current house from a distance to those trees perspective, I'd like to have him also talk about the impact that will have on not needing to grade, as was perhaps shown on these plans. The attempt to site the house in a place that matched the setbacks and balance of the street, which is not necessary, was why the plans were drawn that way. And by locating it a bit further back and to the left, it can, you know, those grading techniques aren't necessarily needed as much. So, Eric, if you could talk about that a bit.
Just one comment before we begin. With regard to indicating trees on the plan or not, you did indicate trees on the plan, and it turned out that the representation was incorrect. So when you represent it, it should be represented accurately. Okay, that just a comment. You can continue.
Eric, if you could talk about the grading, or perhaps why you showed which trees on the map that you did, but mostly the grading.
So in terms of the grading, where the house was originally sited on the property to comply with the prevailing front setback requirement in the zone. Now, what we discussed with the applicant is to move the house further back into the property and then move it to the left. That puts the house at a higher elevation on the property, which will require less grading around the house or less contouring of the land in order to get runoff. Surface runoff is required by the building code to flow away from the dwelling. So it will definitely be beneficial to move the house back and to the left, because the house is going to be higher up and there's going to be less grading around the house that would be necessary. Also, by moving the house towards the left, it's going to be more in line with the footprint of the existing dwelling that currently also has a basement, which is going to further minimize any disturbance within the root zone of the spruce trees that are located along the right property line.
So I guess, can you quantify somehow the extent of the regrading if you do push it back? And how far you'd have to push it back to assure that the, I'll call it the significant trees on the property survive?
It's hard to quantify without actually finding a new location on the property where we will site the house. But looking at the plan and where we were thinking about moving the house back, the house would probably be raised at least a foot in elevation, 12 inches in elevation, which by raising the house and also making adjustments to, that allows us to make adjustments to the grading at the back of the property. Part of what I believe we can do also is to look at perhaps how we could steepen the driveway. Currently, the driveway is proposed at 10%, which if we were to increase the slope of the driveway, that's also going to allow us to increase the height of the house and further reducing the grading necessary around the house. So those are a couple of the options that we had discussed earlier with the applicant, as far as what we might be able to do to minimize the site disturbance.
And Eric, is it from talking with our arborist and your understanding of how these work, some of those conditions really can't be determined or are better determined at the time of field work. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And is the applicant willing to work with the town's arborist and engineer at the time of field work to properly site the house in a way that can alleviate as many of the concerns about the location of the trees and grading as possible?
Absolutely.
There were also some questions about stormwater. Can you talk about the potential for, well, first off, how much stormwater mitigation is on the property now, and the potential for any improvement in the current stormwater flows with the proposed stormwater management that you'll be doing on the site?
So under the existing conditions with the current dwelling, there is no stormwater mitigation or management measures on the existing property. Stormwater or surface water runoff from the rear of this lot flows diagonally, essentially in a southeasterly direction from the back left to the front right. And essentially it flows along the back of the existing house and onto the neighbor's property. That would be lot 11. Without any control or mitigation. What we were proposing as a part of our site design is to allow that stormwater, that surface water runoff that's currently flowing along the backyard, to have it collected and directed via a land swale or a lot swale along the right side of the dwelling, which will take that surface runoff from the back of the property that's presently flowing onto the neighbor's lot. It'll take it along the right side of the new dwelling into the bioretention basin and then into the street. So the benefits of actually the design that we have would be to reduce that surface water runoff onto the neighboring property to the left, or excuse me, to the right, lot 11.
Okay.
I muted myself, apologies. If I could follow up with Corey a bit. And I'm getting an alert that I'm muted. Hopefully you can hear me. Corey, if you can unmute yourself and if you just add again the type of additional field measures that could be worked out as part of your protection plan implemented with the town's arborist and engineer as part of compliance. I know some of the things we had talked about was making sure that demolition or work activity occurred from the, on a left to right basis to keep equipment off of the root zone, even of the part that was not, did not need to be actually physically worked on. The other type of measures that would be available as part of the plan here.
Yeah, we discussed critical root zone protection. We discussed deep root soil health injection simultaneously with HydroChain, just to really fluff up and try our best to rejuvenate the soil and help it through drought stress time, as well as top top dress layer of mulch of evergreen matter to help the new top layer decompositional aspect of the after the any disruption in that general area. Then we also actually talked about outside the critical root zone prior to any construction excavation in the building aspect of things, even maybe potentially doing air spade soil excavation so that they could see what they're working with prior to any scraping or grading of that matter.
And one follow-up again for Eric, by moving the house back and to the left, and I realize against a Kennedy, I probably shouldn't be saying back and to the left too many times. But does that give you flexibility with the siting of the stormwater feature in the front? I know that was initially a very constrained design and concern that would be impact the tree there. By moving the home, does that have a significant flexibility and difference in where you can put that stormwater feature specifically further away from that tree?
It does, because it creates more room in the front yard of the property where we could actually locate the stormwater, the rain garden.
And from a practical standpoint, because the property flows that way now, that's really the logical place. That's where the water goes and essentially needs to be treated. Is that right?
Correct, because all stormwater has to flow via gravity into the system. So any stormwater management facility has to be located downhill from the improvements.
But giving this extra space would allow you to move it further away from where you've shown now.
Absolutely.
I'll represent to the board that we're willing to accept regional conditions here that would allow the applicant and its professionals and the town's professionals to put together and make sure that this activity happens in a way that's consistent with the town's ordinance and best practices. That's in our mind not something that can be decided by this board. Well, many people here at this table actually have an amazing amount of expertise in this field, actually, and share the interest and concern that the applicant has. Ultimately, it's the town's arborist and engineer who administratively would be responsible for making sure that these things happen. And our request is that we allow that to happen with a condition that puts that requirement to work with them on the applicant going forward.
I appreciate your willingness to do that. So I guess that the arborist, the town engineer, and our zoning officer would be involved, and I hate to commit you to this, Derek, but would be involved in reciting and adjusting the grades and the location of the house. I wonder, and this is up to the board, if depending on the nature of the changes, that the board would like to see it again when in its final form. That we'll discuss. So, all right. So, so do you have any other comments relative to the concerns of the tree on the trees?
Just as to that last point, Mr. Chairman, this is something that fortunately or unfortunately happens every day for every lot in Princeton. It's something I think that your engineers and staff and arborists are well accustomed to do and take care of. That this lot is 70 square feet smaller when it was created is almost of no moment. And I would hope, now this was partially my fault that we weren't here last month because the other application went quite a bit long, but they have been on something that is ultimately relatively simple from a zoning perspective, and entirely going to be in the hands of this board's professionals and the town's professionals. I would just ask that that you hand this to your professionals to make sure that it happens. This board ultimately, even if we wanted to ask for relief from those ordinances, it couldn't be granted here. So I think it's best placed with the arborist ultimately. So thank
I
you.
recognize that, and I'm comfortable with our professionals making those decisions. My only question is if they're uncomfortable without us reviewing it again. That was my only concern. Okay. I have one other question with regards to the comment on the lead-based paint, asbestos, hazardous material issue. I assume you did represent that you will follow all applicable standards and regulations regarding that.
That is correct. That's a condition that goes without saying, but if it's a condition that I would like to put in the approval, would certainly consent to that.
Okay. All right. Board members, do you have any questions of the applicant, the applicant's witnesses?
Yeah, I have a question. I guess it was going back to comments by Eric or responses. And he mentioned moving the house and results in the house being set on a slightly higher elevation, which may reduce the grading. What about the cutting? I thought cutting was the bigger concern. So does that get reduced also?
It will get reduced because the higher up the house is, the least amount of contouring that we have to do complete around the dwelling. Part of the building code requirement is that within the first 10 feet around the house, the ground needs to drop at least 6 inches. So that's really the starting point based on the elevation of the floor of the house. So the higher that floor of the house is, the higher that starting point. And since the back of the property is higher than the front of the property, the higher I can get the house, the least amount of cutting we will have to do along the back of the property.
Along the back and the sides?
Yes,
Was it-
correct. Both, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, okay. That makes sense. Michael, any other
Because
questions?
I guess my other question or follow-up is more to our arborists, if that last explanation also makes sense to our arborists. That'll result in less cutting, less grading impact on the trees.
Yeah, so my main concern with this project is the constant grading underneath the drip line of those trees. There are ways to do root pruning when excavating for say a foundation or something like that, but just the constant backhoe operation or grading land elevation underneath the drip line of those trees, that will cause an issue to the Norway spruces, to the adjacent property. Now, I was on site, and as Mr. Lamanna's report indicated, spruces, high surface roots, et cetera, I can attest to that the large surface roots, the structural roots are right on the surface, 3-4 inches in diameter, and just constant back and forth of a bulldozer to do grading, getting into the street will cause harm to that. So that's my major concern. Now, if you need to excavate for a foundation, there are ways to properly root cut and then supplement nutrients and plant healthcare techniques, best management practices. That would be the best approach, but there really shouldn't be any disturbance underneath the root zone, the drip line of the trees to the adjacent property, not back and forth. It just really shouldn't occur whatsoever. So the tree protection fence should stay or should be installed and then should stay for the duration of the project. There shouldn't be any back and forth of grading elevation at all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Board members, any other questions? The applicant, the witnesses, the arborist?
I do.
Yes, Donna.
My question is the size of the proposed new home. does the size of the home impact the trees? Would a smaller home have less impact? Is there any relevance there?
Well, I can tell you that there's obviously the size, the footprint of the house impacts the grading and any tree displacement or removal, etc. I mean, the bigger the footprint, the bigger the amount of disturbance. The home is built in compliance with the requirements, with the bulk standards. So they're allowed to build a house of this size.
Understood. But when we look at the positive and negative criteria associated with the variance requested, do we consider the tree testimony that's been given?
Well, I believe we should. I mean, we know now what the implications of the grading is, or the grading is on the property. That all goes into our consideration whether we approve it or not approve it. Keep in mind that basically the variance is for the de minimis amount of lot area that they're short. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So part of the tree protection ordinance says if a TPZ tree protection zone interferes with any existing structure or improvement or any portion of proposed construction site that is determined to be essential or cannot be reasonably relocated, the enforcement officer shall modify the TPZ tree protection zone to reconcile the conflict. So in scenarios like this in the past, we've used root pruning techniques, we've used supplemental nutrient techniques to make sure that that both sides, that there's a compromise on both sides to make sure that the trees remain healthy, but a structure can be built. I often reference the Bartlett Tree Experts root pruning technique as far as root cutting, how to properly excavate around roots. Just a simple definition, rather than using a backhoe to just rip and tear the roots. Corey of Princeton Tree Care indicated to properly air spade and then sever the roots properly based off of the diameter of the tree and what you can do. So we've used that in the past to excavate, to construct around root systems.
Okay. And the
I
applicants.
think,
Go ahead, Michael.
Steve, I can really appreciate that explanation, clarification on parts of the tree protection ordinance, because it's an ordinance I've never read in my life and have no confidence in making any decision about its applicability that might lead me to even consider trying to reduce an as of right house. But as I say, I'm totally ignorant of the ordinance, and I will now eventually read it. But there seems to also be a little bit, and this probably isn't the first, of requirements of stormwater management and tree protection, and you might get caught in a catch-22. And I think what Taylor just read helps me balance that too, that, there's some relief in the ordinance.
Okay, but it's good that the applicant has indicated the willingness to work with our town professionals.
Absolutely.
And, to come up with a
Yes.
reasonable compromise.
And yes. And I respect the right of the
Can I comment on
public to raise all these points and also in concerns.
Okay. Board members, any other questions? Okay. Mr. Kennedy, I think we're going to at some point go into executive session So if you would like to comment, make a further or closing remarks before we do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board and the neighbors here and all the experts we've heard, thank you. I think, often you have to step back and say, well, what is this land use process about and why do we do this? And it's for these reasons. I think often with review like this and the comments we got, we end up with a better project, and sometimes we end up with a better project when the town's professionals get to look at and participate in some of the more nuanced parts of things. At the end of the day, what we're looking to do is a C variance here for a unfortunately essentially 70 square foot deficient lot, like many in the neighborhood, but not all that requires the lot area variance. I appreciate all the comments here tonight, and I hope we've conveyed, and if to the extent I haven't conveyed it, I imagine you will convey it through condition, that the applicant is very much interested in doing and working with the town to make sure that these trees are protected and the ordinance is complied with to the town's satisfaction. That's not something that this board could bend if we asked for, and we're not asking. So I very much appreciate everyone's input on this. I hope you appreciate the flexibility of the applicant to move the home and take these precautions to protect these trees. These trees that add value to this property as well. We don't want them to be damaged no more than the neighboring property owners do. So with that, again, I want to thank you all for your time tonight. These are kind of novel issues that are honestly probably, you hear from professionals, dealt with often, but outside of this context. It's just because this lot happens to be 70 square foot short that we're talking about it tonight. Often this just happens up on the third floor, and I'll trust that when it goes back to the third floor of Town Hall with the engineering and arborist and Mr. Bridger coming together with the applicant to make sure this house is cited properly, that what you heard tonight is that for the further back it goes, the less grading that is needed, the further away from these trees this will be, and the more flexibility with the stormwater management feature that there will have in citing this. And with that, and putting in their hands, and with the understanding that something has to happen with this property, that they will best be able to decide what the exact configuration is best for the trees and best for the neighborhood. So again, thank you so much for hearing us tonight.
Ryan, can I just add to that real quick?
Yes.
Yes, sorry.
I just wanted to quickly mention, when I first visited the site to review it, the question was asked to me by the applicant, what are in and all options that we can do to best preserve and save these trees? And I just wanted to, give kudos and respect to the other fellow arborists and the other homeowners and neighbors in the area. Sincerely appreciate your passion and your time and your expertise and all the topics that were brought up in the preservation of these trees. But I just wanted to reiterate and mention that was the first question asked to me while on site, and I just thought it was important to add.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, board members, we're going to go into executive session.
Chairman
So
Cohen?
yes.
Here's one, Mr. Taffet has his hand up. I don't know if that's still have a question or not.
Well, the public portion.
Yes. Oh,
Go ahead, please. Just
thank you
be
so
brief.
much. I'll be really brief. In the tree protection ordinance, what your arborist just read, shall modify the tree protection zone to reconcile the conflict. But then the part he didn't read is what follows. Provided that the modified tree protection zone continues to protect the tree's critical root zone.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, let's go back to executive session. board members, let's bring up any discussions, any questions. And if at some point, if someone would like to make a motion on this property, I'd appreciate it. So, and we have to discuss if we're going to approve it, what the conditions will be.
I feel like what I've heard is that we're not really in a position, if there are conditions, that we're not in a position to put any conditions which directly which protect the trees. But but to the extent that we can, that would be my hope. But that's what I would like a little clarification about.
Explain that again to me.
Are we, if we can put conditions in that maximally protect the trees, that would be what I would hope we can do. But I'm not clear about whether or not that's under our purview, whether or not we are entitled to do that, or whether we're simply, that's what I'd like to know, maybe from Ms. Casey, if that's.
Well, Eve, what you've heard tonight from the applicant is that regardless of whether they need to or not, even though what you've heard from Mr. Saputer is that, no, they do need to take appropriate measures to trees. But in any case, the applicant has said they want to do that they are willing for that to be a condition. So while the condition may be that the siting of where the house goes on the property has to be determined in conjunction with town staff, the arborist, the engineer, and the zoning officer, to protect these 10 large trees and to comply with the town ordinance, I'm not sure whether, given the applicant's willingness to do this and their position that they want to do it, I don't know why the board wouldn't make it a condition, because the applicant is saying, yes, we want to show you we are committed, we want to take the necessary measures. You've heard the same thing from the applicant's arborist. So in the past, has the board looked at issues like landscaping? Yes. Has the board looked at what can be done perhaps to ensure that where a house is located, what will happen to trees? I think the board has looked at it in the past and has considered that. But in this case, the applicant has said, that's fine. They're going to do that. They want to do that. They're trying to work with neighbors. So I don't know why the board wouldn't do it.
Okay.
Well, I would think, excuse me, even then I'll let you speak. I for one, and I'm sure other board members would agree, of course, we're going to take advantage of that commitment on the part of the applicant and rely on our town professionals to try to resolve these issues. I think that's important. Go ahead, Eve, I'm sorry.
No, well, I just wondered how, so I'm confused. Are you saying that you will leave it at that, or we would make
Oh, I think we'll have conditions if we choose to approve it, we'll have conditions of that approval. And that would basically take into consideration what the applicant has agreed to work with the town professionals. So I think that's important. We would just pass that resolution or working that out to our arborist and engineer and our zoning officer.
I'd like to ask a question. Could we possibly put some teeth into that by having the applicant agree not to exercise the part of the tree ordinance that says they have the right to chop everything down?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I had asked that question when, just after we had finished the public portion, what the legal obligation is of the applicant to keep the trees. And again, I was told that in theory, everything can come out and they'd have to do replacement trees based on the size of the existing trees removed. We can probably put a condition on there that would, based on what you're saying, we can put any conditions on it, quite frankly, but is that a realistic condition at this stage?
I guess what I'm saying is they have that option under the ordinance, and I'm wondering if they would agree to waive that type of option in the ordinance as a condition. And whether, maybe Ms. Casey can say, is that a permissible condition?
Well, restate
Wait,
what you're saying. So you're you're basically saying that well, why don't you say it again so I understand it?
I'm sorry, what I'm saying is the ordinance gives them the option of chopping everything down. They say
Right.
they say they don't want to do that.
Right.
I'm asking whether we would be within our rights to impose as a condition that they explicitly waive that option over the tree ordinance. And
But is that all the trees or some of the trees or any specific trees?
Yeah.
those, yes, I understand the point of that question, and I guess I don't know exactly how to answer it, but it's possible to designate a number of the trees that would be potentially most affected by this development and say, do you agree to waive chopping them down unless they become dead or dangerous, which is always possible.
I guess, George, part of the problem is that currently, and I don't know the answer to this, currently, if the house were cited as is shown on the application, I don't know what trees, if any, would need to be removed. And then, of course, the house is going to be, the discussion has centered on shifting the house away from these particular 10 mature trees. I don't know if that shifting causes the need to take down any trees. So I think perhaps probably all the board could do is we focused on 10 mature trees and the efforts that are going to be made to protect them. I know there were comments made by the public regarding a cherry tree. I don't know if what the applicant's position is on that. I thought I heard a comment made that the applicant would like to save that tree, or they intend to. But I guess the problem for the board is that without the applicant's cooperation, as our arborist explains, you have an ordinance on the books that says take down whatever you want and just put some other plantings to take its place.
I didn't really hear anything about chopping trees down. I think the bigger danger is that some of the trees may be just damaged, and it would, that would not, the roots would be damaged, and that might not, show for a few years. I think that's the subtlety that we're, being asked to consider rather than chopping down. That would be a surprise to me.
I'd also like to mention too, just to clarify, it's not encouraged to clear cut a lot, but in the event that the trees lie on private property and they are in need of removal, then that's the case. It's not, I just want to clarify, I didn't say clear cut a lot, but in the event the trees lie on private property, they are under the municipal ordinance as far as replacement based off their condition.
Yeah, but I think we're getting into by saying, do we keep the cherry tree? Do we keep this or that? I think we have to, I would imagine, or I would suggest we have to place the review in the hands of the arborist, the engineer, again, and the zoning officer because again, the applicant is going to fine tune this house location and subsequently redo the grading. And we won't know until that grading is redone, the extent of any possible damage to the trees. I mean, Taylor, is that reasonable to say?
Yes, that's reasonable.
So I would think that at this stage, we don't have enough information to make specific suggestions as to what trees stay and don't stay. I mean, I think it's important to recognize that the existing plan did not identify all the trees that we all know. And we do have more information on the trees, and our arborist has agreed that he will monitor this, and he's obviously well versed in tree protection and things like that. So if we're so inclined to approve it, I think we can take advantage of that. And the commitment by the applicant to work with us meaning the town.
Chairman Cohen,
Yes,
can I ask a question?
Sure.
Ryan, I thought you mentioned earlier that you would try to stage, your client would try to stage any demolition from the left side of the property.
That is correct. So as to avoid bringing trucks or heavy equipment across that, what I'll call the right side yard. Correct.
Would you accept a condition to that effect, that every effort will be made to demolish the existing building and not get on the tree protection zone that lies on the right-hand side of the property?
Absolutely.
Good point, Derek.
Could we expand that to include the construction also? That heavy equipment come in from the left?
I think that makes sense.
Sure.
So,
let me just with the one caveat there, that if we do end up moving the house really far to the left, I don't think that will change things, but just as Karen crafts that particular thing, if we end up all the way up against the left side yard setback, I just want to make sure there's a little bit of flexibility. I think that means we need to bring trucks on the right side, but
I would say that would fall under our condition if we do impose it, to allow our arborist and engineer to make determinations on what is reasonable.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question just for clarification for Ryan.
Yes.
It's my understanding, I think, that if we say no to this, we're saying no to any construction on this property. Is that true?
Say that again, Steve.
If we were to say no to this project,
Right.
we're saying no to any future construction on the property too. I mean, if this doesn't meet the criteria, what could possibly meet the criteria?
Well, that's a determination we have to make right now. Are we going to approve it or not approve it?
Well, that's my point. I mean, if we do say no, then we're saying.
Well, Steve, I guess, we keep coming up against the same question. And in light of the ordinance on the books that allows a proportional floor area ratio, so that a house that can be built on a lot that you might say.
No, I understand that.
Yeah,
I understand that, but my point is.
Yeah.
My point is that what we're saying no to really is the ability to have construction equipment on this property. And if we're saying no to this, how could we say, even if they build a smaller house, they would still be putting, so.
I don't think in our discussions we're taking it that far. We're trying to recommend to the applicant that he keep the heavy equipment away from the existing stand of trees on the right-hand side and do his best to do that for protection. And we're asking our arborists to monitor what they're doing and make suggestions as to any potential tree saving techniques or methods.
No, I understand that. I do understand that.
Steve, I think if we didn't have that ordinance on the books, then obviously I think the board would have a greater ability to say the house is too big. So if you said no to an application for a house this size, would another size of a house be acceptable? But we have an ordinance that allows homes that neighbors
No,
may
I
feel,
understand that, but I think even if they put a smaller house, they'd still have to have construction equipment. That's my
they
point.
would. I mean,
And
I
what
don't think-
we're worried about right now, seemingly, is the construction equipment interfering with the trees, not the house.
yeah, but I mean, Steve, if you have a smaller house, then I'm assuming, and either our arborist or zoning officer, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have a smaller house, then does that not allow some additional room to work on the site? When you have a larger home, then it's extending over the site. So I don't know if I can agree with you on that point, but I will agree with you that given the ordinances that are on the books, you're right. You're saying the applicant is allowed to build a house of that size. What stops them is the lot area, which it is a residential lot. It has a house on it already. So as we've talked before, your hands are somewhat tied. So that's that. I think that's the situation. So
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, Stephen?
No.
Okay. So, does somebody want to move this application forward?
I'll move to approve it with the conditions we discussed, but I don't agree with a blanket condition that they can't take down any trees. I think leave that to the professionals when they work with the resiting of the house. There could be trade-offs between protecting the mature trees and when things move back and left. I don't know what gets impacted at that point.
I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you. I'll second. Okay. Right, so I think though, that we have to come up with the conditions. I mean, so the applicant has agreed to work with our arborist and engineer and zoning department to come up with a plan that works to the best of everybody's ability with the existing conditions on the site. And that will include not only the placement of the house horizontally on the site, but vertically as well, as it affects the grading. So the fact that they'll work with our town professionals is what we want.
okay, do you want there to be a reference to these 10 large mature trees, or you don't want that?
I don't know how we reference those 10 and not any other trees. I think it's the trees in general. I mean, it's a beautiful lot, and we want to keep as much as we can. I guess I don't know enough about the 10 trees to know if they're worth saving. I think our arborist is going to
leave
make
that to the arborist, our arborist.
Exactly. And our engineer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would we want to say anything about environmentally, with regard to lead-based paint and any contaminants on the site? I think that I think there are regulations in place to regulate that. So I don't think we have to say anything specific about that, because that'll be monitored by, I believe, by our building department. And
Right. I don't recall we've done that in the past.
I don't think we've done anything environmentally like, with lead-based paint and asbestos. If anybody wants that in there, that's fine, but. So, all right, so we have a motion and a second, and we have conditions which Karen, I guess, to the best of your ability, you'll put down on paper.
Correct. That's
And
correct.
you'll circulate those for everybody to
Yes.
look at.
Yep.
Okay. Any other comments before we call for a vote? So we're basically saying we're going to approve the variance request subject to the conditions we've talked about. Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Which is not unusual for what we've done in the past.
Right. Exactly. Okay, if there are no more comments, Claudia, would you please call the roll? So voting yes would be in favor of the variance.
Ms.
with
Chen,
conditions.
Yes.
Ms. Coulson,
Yes.
Mr. Davich,
Yes.
Mr. Floyd,
Yes.
Mr. Shriver,
Yes.
Mr. Stein,
Yes.
Chairman Cohen.
Yes. Thank you all.
They-
I hope the neighbors are pleased. I think we've done everything we can do to assure that this is going to be done properly.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and everyone. Much appreciated.
Okay, so moving right along.
Whee!
Our
Can we
next
take a
step-
quick 5-minute break?
Okay, that's fine. I'm in
Thank you.
favor of that. Okay.
Okay.
It is 9:49, 5 minutes, 9:54. We're back in session.
Okay.
George, are you having cookies too, or just a glass of milk?
Just a glass of milk.
Wow. I was thinking of having a glass of scotch, but I guess I shouldn't. have to
There
leave.
you go. I could join you in that.
Need to be a little careful on the environmental things. Seeing although I guess I wasn't involved in the coffee roastering thing where that was kind of an environmental discussion.
Yeah.
Not less dangerous than asbestos, though.
Be a toss-up.
Mm.
What did you say about the coffee roaster?
Oh, nothing.
I actually was in there today for the first time.
Oh, yeah?
I was the only customer, but it was 2:30 in the afternoon, so.
I'm hoping they're open now.
Claudia?
Yes, Mr. Shriver, can you remove Mr. Alexander, Mr.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that.
You remove him?
Did.
Yeah, I don't have, it's giving me an error, but you're the
Hmm.
host, so you can do it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. And I should, shouldn't I?
Yes.
Peace.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Also, before we start, there's Lou, Jeff, and Jackie in the audience will be the three people I'll need for the next application.
Okay, but we don't,
What are the names again? Can you tell them to raise their hand?
Yeah, sure.
We all are here.
Mr. Shriver, can you make him attendees, panelists?
Make who?
The ones with a raised hand.
Oh. Yeah.
Thank you.
Ryan, did you say there's a third one?
Well, so there are two homeowners. They may be on the same Zoom though.
Okay.
Lou has raised his hand. They're on separately. So sorry about that.
Okay.
There's a third.
Come on.
and Stephen, you're gonna remove Mr. Alexander, Mr. Piskorski, and Mr. Hessnell?
I did.
Oh,
I
why
did.
do I still see them though? Okay.
You do? I don't see
Yeah.
them.
I do.
I see them.
I see them.
I don't see them.
I can simply step out.
No, it's okay. You just got one person left.
Jeff,
Mr. Hessnell.
who do I have left?
Aaron Pesnell.
Yeah,
I'm
just wanna-
volunteering. I'm also volunteering to step away from the meeting.
That's
Megan.
okay. That's fine, but we,
I don't have him on my screen. I'm
well,
sorry.
I see him.
I do
Clearly
too.
he's there if he can talk to us.
He did. He just said, I'll step
Yeah.
away.
No, I heard
Uh,
that, but.
yeah.
Why don't I see him?
Now he's gone.
Okay, great.
Steve, you're muted.
Okay. Derek, can you review your memo with us, please?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Louis Hazu and Jacqueline DeLeo Hazu are the owner applicants of 28 Edge Hill Street. They are seeking a C1 variance to permit the construction of an attic expansion and exception to the required combined side yard setbacks and the height to setback ratio. Property is located in the R1's B zone in the former borough. Subject lot is complying with the applicable bulk requirements. the subject lot is non-complying with the applicable bulk requirements. The lot area requirement is 20,000 square feet. The existing lot area is 10,594. The required lot width is 125 feet, and the existing is 51 feet. And the house itself is non-compliant with regard to the required 30-foot combined side yard setback. The existing is 32.6. That's got to be an error. It's non-complying with regard to the height to setback ratio of 1.5 to 1. The existing is 3 to 1 on the right side, and the left side it's non-compliant. The existing is 1.75 to 1. Subject property is located in the Mercer Hill Historic District. It was reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission. Elizabeth Kim is here and she can provide comments after I'm done with the memo. The applicant is proposing a rear two-story addition that will expand the existing kitchen and provide space for a closet powder room on the first floor. The addition will enlarge the master suite on the second floor. The existing front porch is proposed to be covered. The rear addition and the front porch comply with the applicable bulk requirements and can be built as of right, subject to review by the HPC. The applicant is proposing to raise the existing attic roof and add a rear-facing dormer. The increase in the height is within the required combined side yard setback and is considered an increase in the existing degree of non-compliance. And that relates also to the height to setback ratio. The combined side yard setback requirements 30, the existing and proposed is 27. The right side height to setback required is 1.5 to 1, and the existing is 3 to 1, and will increase to 3.125 to 1. And the left side, which is currently 1.75 to 1, will increase to 1.875 to 1. And they have requested consideration under the C1 criteria. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to address them.
Okay, any questions of Mr. Berger? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Kim, do you want to summarize your memo for us?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Mr. Bridger indicated, the HPC did review this application. The application came in for a concept review on April 17, 2023, and then returned with their formal application on September 18, 2023. And at that time, they wished to obtain the partial demolition approval to make the improvements which are part of their application. The property, together with other properties on the Edge Hill Street, represent a significant neighborhood within this Mercer Hill Historic District. And what the HPC had determined is that the most prominent features of the house is the one that's visible from Edge Hill Street right of way, which is the front facade. Raising the street facade, a street-facing roof will increase the roof pitch. However, the egg and dart cornice and gutter lines will remain unaltered, so it'll stay in the same position. So just the roof itself will be raised. HPC expressed no objection to the proposed roof increase, the dormer, rear dormer addition or rear addition. And they supported the partial demolition for this work to be done. The front facade has a planned new portico covering, an existing stoop at the front entry door. HPC expressed concerns about the appropriateness of this portico design. They had concerns about the proposed 2 8-inch column fluted columns that were to match the pilasters that surround the front door. And they also had concerns about the replacement of the existing brick stoop and stair treads, which were going to be replaced with new bluestone, which HP felt were not in keeping with the construction of the circa 1835 building and its features. Other recommendations that HPC mentioned to the applicant was there is one existing window which the applicant wishes to close off for a new closet. They prefer for this to be shuttered in place. So that way the fenestration and the shutters itself would be closed to show the presence of that window. although it could be completely closed on the inside to function as a closet. The applicants appear to be amenable to this recommendation. Further comments that HPC made came about the double and triple replacement windows, which were not really in keeping or compatible with the house, especially on the north elevation. So the street facing and the north building elevations really retain the most original symmetry and fenestrations of the house. On the other facades, there have been alterations which really do not show what the symmetry was at the time. So, there has been enough alteration. However, on the north and street facing, they felt that it was important to retain this architectural rhythm that it still exists. In addition, they talked about the window replacements, specifically about the ones that are facing onto Edgehill Street. They felt, again, because this is the most significant view and facade on the building, that they felt that the true divided lights, if the windows are to be replaced, should be replaced in kind instead of replacing with simulated divided light. And since the applicant is proposing to replace it and not preserve or restore it, they would like this elevation to be the most prominent and replaced in kind, as mentioned. The applicant also agreed that the arch window in the attic on the south elevation, as HPC recommended, to match the one that's on the north side, which is actually the original style and more historically accurate. At the meeting, the applicant's architect also talked about other changes that weren't part of their submission. They talked about the ceiling mounted light fixture, which they preferred now to place wall mounted fixtures, which HPC did not have a problem with. And they also talked about perhaps putting side lights for the front door. And HP said that they would support that possibly if they were only very narrow side lights. They also talked about the portico plan, and they felt that they were willing to appoint a subcommittee to work with the applicant if your board supported this application. And that's pretty much the comments that HPC made on this application. I'm available for any questions any of you may have. Thank you.
Ms. Kim, I should have sworn you in initially, so I'm going to ask now. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you have given is truthful?
It was. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board members, any questions of Ms. Kim? Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Mr. Kennedy, good to see you again.
Long time no see.
Please begin.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Ms. Kim, and extend our thanks to the HPC itself. As Elizabeth said, this is an application for several, I'll say, minor bulk variances for an extremely constrained and undersized lot where 125 feet of width is required. We have 51. We are less than half the lot size. These are quite small lots on a very condensed or very dense street where essentially the entire house is built within the side yard setback. So while the house actually complies as to size, even as proposed with the small addition, we need relief really to touch anything on the left side of the home since the entirety is in the side yard setback. You'll see, I think, a very tastefully done and one that was worked out over several HPC meetings to make sure it fit with the neighborhood. It is a small addition to the rear that actually is stepped in to respect the setbacks. It is a rear-facing dormer in the attic to create a little bit of usable space up there. Technically, that cuts into one of the side yard setbacks. We have a compliant height increase, but I think you'll see, as HPC agreed, it's really imperceptible from the street. That creates a little bit of headroom and a usable attic and a front porch. Now, there was a lot of discussion over several meetings about the front porch. I think you'll see that there's a very amiable applicant who would be happy to design something that makes sense for the neighborhood. I think we initially felt that what the design we had came out of the discussion in the April concept meeting, but ultimately they really want to just get into their house, and as long as there's like a short administrative process to make sure that it's the design that works for historic, they're amiable to that. There's a few I guess minor details I think about some of the recommendations that we'll talk about, but ultimately I think this was a good collaboration between HPC and the applicant's team to get a home up to modern standards in a very tight space without adding much to it. Tonight we'll have 3 witnesses, or maybe 1.5 collectively. I've got the homeowners here, Jackie and Lou, and our architect, Jeff Fleischer. Perhaps if we can have them all sworn in at once, we can.
Yes, we could do
start
that if
testimony.
everybody could, if you would all unmute yourselves, Mr. Hazu, Ms. DeLeo, Mr. Fleischer. Do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
I do.
Thank you.
All right, Jackie and Lou, if you want to just quickly introduce yourselves and your plan for your home here that's been kind of circling and waiting for this process for quite some time.
Good evening, Chairman Cohen, Vice Chair Schreiber, and all the board members. We currently live in Belmead. We've been here for over 20 years, enjoying the Princeton community nearby, and we're at a point now in our lives where we're ready to downsize and get into Princeton and enjoy it more, hopefully. We purchased this home in early December of 2022, and we've been working diligently towards this and waiting a long time to get before you. So hopefully this will be an easy application to review. It's gone through, as has been said, 2 sittings with the Historical Preservation Committee, and it sounded like when Mr. Bridger read the report like we were trying to do a lot. We're really not, and hopefully you can see that from the pictures on the application and the review that Brian Kennedy and Jeff Fleischer will give you. So if you have any questions, we're here to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Jeff, I know you've appeared before this board many times, and it is late. So if you give the most condensed version of your credentials, so I can have you accepted as an expert as humanly possible, I would accept that. I appreciate that.
Sure. I have a bachelor's of architecture from New Jersey Institute of Technology. I'm licensed in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, and I've had my own practice since 1997.
We'll accept you. Please continue.
Thank you. And as is our practice, we'd submitted a series of slides that I'd like to share on the screen. I believe it's 15 that we intend to show. If we could have it marked as our one and only exhibit this evening.
Okay, so done.
Thank you. So Jeff, I know you've been working on this project for quite some time. And what we're looking at here on the left is a photo of this house here at 13 Edge Hill, or excuse me, 28 Edge Hill?
Yes, it's the front facade.
All right. And just to orient the board, I guess we're between 206 and Mercer on Edge Hill Street, kind of backing up to the Princeton Seminary campus. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. Here's a zoomed in version showing our side of the street. Excuse me. This next map shows the Mercer Hill Historic District overlay that we are subject to. This type of district, as excuse me, Elizabeth said in a report, is one of the types where the concern is what's visible from a public right of way. And then Jeff, this is the zoning map, kind of showing the whether it's Swiss cheese or kind of a hockey player smile of mixed educational and residential zoning in this area, but ultimately we're in the residential zone here. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So first, I guess we want to try to explain the additions that we're talking about, maybe starting with the rear addition. So we're, from left to right here, maybe walk the board through what we're looking at or what we're doing here.
Yeah, so the shaded area that the blue arrow is pointing to is the approximately 10-foot by 20-foot addition off the rear of the building, which will house the new kitchen.
And this addition actually respects the side yard setbacks. It's stepped back enough that it doesn't itself require setback variance.
Yes,
Okay.
and it has a second floor addition over the top of that, which will be the master suite.
Got it. Now, I'm also, while we're here, just to save us a little bit of time later, on the bottom right, this is the side facade of the proposed condition. There's some windows here, and this might be a good time to talk about the windows that we've discussed with HPC. On the left main side of the house, I believe, is a previously shuttered or kind of boarded up window that's being restored and opened. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
And then on the top right, this is the window that HPC recommended and we agreed to, not removing, but keeping in place and shuttering almost like the one previously had been done on the front. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
All right. And then I guess next, these are the kind of ganged windows in the new addition that HPC talked about. Can you talk a little bit about why, we feel that those are kind of necessary in this configuration, and what's behind there that is not compatible with the original window location?
Yeah, the first set of 3 windows would be in the stairwell leading to the basement, and the second set of 3 would actually be the high windows in the mudroom.
So I guess the idea there is to let some light in and have it not interfere with the stairs and
right
or a neighborly. Now, in your view from the street, is there really any way to, are those visible? Really?
You'll never have a full-on view from the street of those windows. Yeah.
The next element that we're talking about is the I guess the front facade here. So you've got the existing photo of it and the proposed. You're talking about the porch. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but top right is existing, and bottom right is the proposed front portico. Can you talk a little bit about the design of that and what the applicant would be willing to do just to make sure everyone is satisfied that it's the right design for the neighborhood?
Right. So we were going to maintain the existing stairs, but we were going to replace the brick with bluestone. We're going to maintain the wrought iron handrails. And we were also going to mimic the pilasters that were on either side of the door. I believe HPC agreed that we could add skylights on either side of the door, pushing those pilasters out to the very edge. And then there was talk about they didn't feel that the fluted columns were appropriate, so we were going to remove that detail from the columns.
And that's something that the applicant is certainly willing to do. Is that right?
Yes.
And as far as the side light goes, something we'd be willing to, if HPC's staff was willing to work with us, we'd be happy to work out something that they found it satisfactory, I guess, with the narrow side lights that they kind of discussed. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. The next component is the rear-facing dormer and a slight revision to the upper floor, excuse me, the attic roof line. So top here, these are the current elevation and the proposed elevation, showing the slight difference.
That's right.
And then bottom left here, that's that existing cornice detail that's going to stay exactly the same.
The egg and dart, yes.
Okay.
So the gutter line will remain where it is. We're just raising the pitch of the roof itself.
And the pitch right now is extremely shallow.
Yes, it's like 5 on 12, and we're proposing to raise it to 8 on 12.
And I think we'll show some photos in a second. That's not really visible from the street, but I think you can tell from the street photo on the right that you wouldn't even, you'd almost think it's a flat roof at this point. It's just not something that can be seen.
Yes, it is very shallow.
And the profiles on the right show kind of an overlay of the proposed rear facing shed dormer to get a little bit of headroom in the attic, and an overlay that shows the slight difference in the roof line that's proposed. And what type of room would that be up there? I guess it's a.
I think it's intended to be a study or home office.
Okay. Next to slide 10, I guess this is a series of photos, from the street, again highlighting the change, but kind of showing how difficult or really de minimis it would be. And I'll note this was one of the things that HPC worked with us on over a couple of meetings and had no issue with this slight modification. Again, we got a series of we thought it was helpful, with HPC to kind of show the subject property and a lot of the properties on the street. There's a Jeff, I guess you could maybe talk about what there is surrounding us on either side, and but it's a kind of an eclectic types of roofs, definitely, right?
It is, yes. Some with much steeper slopes, yes.
Now we're going to the rear now. We talked about the rear addition, but we're talking about the rear dormer and roof modification. To the left, though, that's a photo of I know for HPC, for this type of district, we're not really concerned with what you can see from other properties so much, but it is perhaps a common item to have these little mini shed dormers off the back.
Yes, it is.
And I see you have it offset, looking back to front. I see it on the left side. That's, I guess, to avoid as much as you can the height to setback and the existing I guess setback issue on that side.
Actually, it's to avoid the stairwell.
Okay.
Yeah.
This next slide shows, so of the variances that are required, it is a setback variance for the minor changes to the roof and the front porch that happen to be in that existing left setback, and the slight revision to the height to setback ratio on both sides. So the left is the existing profile, the right is the proposed profile with the very minor changes to the height to setback ratio caused by creating some usable space in the attic.
And those dashed lines, the angled dashed lines are the ordinance required setbacks or height setback ratio.
So ultimately, because this is a 51 foot wide lot where 125 feet is expected, it's no surprise to you that most of this house is kind of chopped off by the height to setback triangle.
Yes, in its current form, yes.
Pardon me. Our next slide, we've got the showing, I guess, of the setback line and a showing of the existing, how much of the existing home, but not the new rear addition, is already in that setback, and that how any modification, including just covering the front porch or changing the roof line, is technically in that setback. But that's the type of de minimis setback issue that we're talking about. Now, we did, look at under neighborhood character, there is some understanding and relief for things projecting into side yards and height to setback ratios. Unfortunately, the dormer part, while it's not really on that side, the rules for that were kind of were meant to cover dormers facing a side, and just the math doesn't work. So there's no relief for that particular dormer, as it turns out. But these types of things have been thought about, maybe not perfectly, but these small changes still do require the setback variance. Before I get to the slide, I think there's one piece that we could show on here. This is I guess the left side of the home. One of HPC's recommendations was that rather than replace this window in kind, that it be replaced with two kind of double hung windows that might match the other side. We'd asked the board, we've since looked at the costs of doing that. We initially thought it would be less money to buy this complicated window than to do these, but it turns out to reframe the attic and put those new window framing in was actually quite a bit of work, and we'd like to replace, essentially in kind what is there now. We also, in some demo investigations, while we don't think it's original, we believe it's been there for quite some time, possibly since the house was moved, and that style does, we believe, represent what's been there for quite some time. But we would hope that we could have some support to kind of keep what's there now, essentially, rather than replace it with two new double hung windows just based on the cost. Like the last application, but also very much dislike the last application. This is a classic C1. These variances are all based on this lot being altogether too narrow for the zone, less than half the size that's required. And as a result, you really can't do anything with the home without being in that side yard setback. I hope you'll agree, as HPC largely did with the design here, that as far as the variances go, the treatment was very tasteful, with a kind of a scalpel, and only changing as much of the home and adding imperceptible additions and kind of hiding additional headroom space for some usable space in the attic, allows this home to be modernized and used by this family looking to kind of age in place here, but without changing the character of the home and having it still fit in and look almost identical, aside from the front porch, which we were happy to work out with HPC, ultimately what the details of what that looks like, if you're inclined to approve this project from a variance perspective. So with that, happy to have our architect or our homeowners available to answer any questions.
Board members, any questions? The owner, the architect? Okay. If there are no questions, we'll open this up to the public. Mr. Kennedy, do you want to say something before we open it to the public?
No, just again, thank you all for your consideration and time tonight. I know it's always a struggle to deal with these tiny lots, and I just hope you agree that this dormer treatment, the slight change to the front, and dealing with the addition on the back is a again a tasteful way to adapt to one of these homes for modern use. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, at this time, we'll open this meeting to the public. Claudia, has anybody indicated they'd like to speak?
I think Elizabeth wants to speak. Elizabeth?
Yes, Elizabeth?
Yes. Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I can wait until the public, but I just had some comments to address what Mr. Kennedy's presentation was. When he talked about the attic window staying as it is, just so the zoning board knows that the criteria that HPC uses when someone wants to replace something in the style, if it's already existing, they allow that to occur. So if they wanted to keep it with the arch windows, they could. HPC was suggesting that it matched the style on the other side. And understanding, I'm assuming their architect did some investigation on the framing there to determine that it would be a lot more work. And just for consideration, if you didn't want to do that and you just wanted to put one window in, of the same style as on the north side, I think the HPC would be supportive of that. But in either case, you know, as of right, you can put in the same style.
Thank you. Claudia, anyone else like to speak?
We have somebody named Jessica Vieira. Want to speak?
Okay. Please.
Hi there. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Ms. Vieira, before you continue, we do have to swear you in, and if you're comfortable, would you give us your address?
Sure, Jessica Vieira at 86 Stockton Street.
Alrighty, and do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
Yes.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for allowing me to speak on not only my own behalf, but also the neighborhood. Several of the other residents have not been as persistent as I to hang on to these meetings as long as I have. I'd like to note, first of all, that at the September 18th meeting of the HPC, there was not a time for the public to speak prior to the applicants and their attorney being on the call. And so as a result, because much of this is a zoning issue, not necessarily HPC issue, I sat through the nice few other meetings, including this one. I've sent a letter that I guess I have to, I'd prefer to read just because I was very careful and thoughtful about what I said in the letter. But I'd like to just make comment that because we were not able to address this as a public comment in the September meeting, some of these things may be sort of further down the road than may have been expected, and I'd hope that they would be still considered. First of all, I'd like to welcome Jackie and Lou. I've met them personally. I've also been in their home before they bought it, so I'm familiar with the home and the interior. Our family resides at 86 Stockton Street at the corner of Edge Hill. Many of you know us because we've done several rounds of and iterations of not only zoning, but also historic preservation work on our property. We've invested significantly in our home, as have the others in our neighborhood, all the while maintaining the architectural integrity of the home. And we've worked diligently to remain in keeping with the neighborhood, which seems to be, as a side, being abused lately. This street, Edge Hill, is not only historically significant in Princeton and in New Jersey, but it's important to our country's story. In most other communities, quite frankly, thanks to the work of the HPC, our street might be considered a museum given its age and quality of preservation efforts, let alone the significance of the barracks and the homes around it. We and our neighbors are proud of the Mercer Hill Historic District, and Edge Hill, its homes, is cited in many studies of historical architecture. It's described as a neighborhood of period-specific homes that are 2.5 stories. Take a walk around, they're all 2.5 stories. They're not 3 stories. I don't intend to be the difficult neighbor, but our new neighbors at 28 Edge Hill have submitted a permit for various improvements and much needed modernizations to their antique home. Many are within their right and seem fine to us. In their Historic Preservation Commission and zoning application, they requested a change to the pitch of their front roof line so as to accommodate more head height in the top floor front room of their home. They're asking for 1.8 inches to 2 feet of height. I don't know the exact ask because it's hard for me to zoom in on the notes, be added to the home. And in doing so, they would make this a 3-story structure. I would note that on the application, the zoning board application suggests the home would exist as a 2-story home and it would continue to be a 2-story home, but in fact, in the front of that property, it would become a 3-story home. I was on the HPC meeting Zoom, the other neighborhood, and with another neighbor, but we were not called to raise our concern over this element of the proposed changes. The HPC focused on the proposed changes to the front porch. Their concern was that the porch was, as drawn, did not suit the style of the home, nor was fitting to the period of the architecture. The HPC failed to comment on the change of the slope and the raising of the roof line, and sadly, the commission called for public comment on the application after they had already issued an opinion on the application. Unfortunately, the neighbors were not given a chance to share their thoughts before the HPC decision was agreed. Although the original home is documented to have a front porch, the HPC decided that the proposed porch should be redrawn to conform to a more historical standard. The proposed new roof line requires zoning variance, which should have been required should have required an HPC approval. Not only is this a zoning issue, it involves an HPC concern. The front roof line change is not in keeping with the neighborhood. The home's position on the street at the crest of the hill and its exact location immediately adjacent to the barracks means a new steeper pitched roof may appear to be more obviously out of place than any other in any other architecturally diverse neighborhood. As a sidebar, it should be noted that 28 Edge Hill is also constructed on a higher foundation, upwards of 18 inches, than its neighbors on either side. This alone makes the narrow and tall home stand out even further. Similar to this overly drawn front porch, which the HPC noted as a concern, raising the front roof line would not only be architecturally inappropriate for this home, would also be architecturally inappropriate for this home. More importantly, the front roof line changed, it would set a precedent for more future significant changes to all historic structures. The HPC was established in 1985 to preserve the historic quality of the neighborhood and its buildings. The master plan of 96, as amended in 2009 and currently under review, encourages historic preservation through land use and policies that seek to preserve and protect the character of established neighborhoods, buildings, and sites. Allowing this roofline modification would set an incredible precedent. As mentioned by Mr. Kennedy today, this evening, the HPC seeks to protect this and all that is visible from the street. If there's anything more visible, it's the roof line. The HPC has been strict in ensuring that the front and side views of homes of our neighborhood remain historically as accurate as possible. All of Mercer Hill residents have subjected to this rule and all have worked hard to stay within this guideline. As a result, our street retains its 1830s charm. Were this change to be permitted, it would negate many years of preservation in one fell swoop. When the Hazus purchased the home, they were fully aware that they were buying a historic neighborhood. Having been in the home, I agree the top room is small, but adding a back dormer will help them significantly. Even without the new dormer, there's no hardship that would require an amendment to a front roof line that would cause significant aesthetic change and potential for future damage to our historically significant neighborhood. We urge the zoning board to approve the other changes as proposed, including the back dormer, but please don't approve the change to the front roof line. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Elizabeth, would you, well, let's just hold the questions till we're done.
I mean, I can address the meeting.
Okay, just one sec. Let's just wait a second. Claudia, has anybody else indicated they'd like to speak?
There are no more hands.
Okay, all right. Before we close the public portion, Elizabeth, can you comment on that?
Yes, and Ms. Vieira, it was accurate. Unfortunately, during the meeting, public comment was not offered at the time prior to HPC making their determination on the application. And as the chair had said to Ms. Vieira, that she urged her to come to the zoning board to be able to offer her comments, because unfortunately, we did not provide that time for the public.
Okay, but what is your feeling regarding the comments?
The comments that she's making?
Yes.
So, you know, I don't vote.
Okay.
So, I mean, I could give my own opinion, but that wouldn't probably, obviously not be the opinion or necessarily the opinion of HPC.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
perhaps I can
Michael?
ask it.
Wait, hold on. Hang on for a second, Michael. Yes, Mr. Kennedy.
Maybe I can ask it a different way, because I don't want it to be the impression of this board that the roof line was not discussed or approved. It was considerably discussed over 2 meetings, and I know the memo says not objected to. I think this is kind of the polite way of saying that was the part that they liked, and there was no issue. So I just want to be absolutely clear that that was both front and center, discussed extensively and approved by HPC as part of this plan. So to the extent that this board doesn't want to take their advice on that, there's a process for that. But I want to be absolutely clear about the meeting, including the comments from the neighbors, which I stayed on to hear. They were after the shortly after the, this part of the hearing ended, but I heard them as did the board. But I, again, just want to be clear that that aspect of this was opined on by HPC.
Thank you. Michael?
I guess with what Mr. Kennedy just said, I'd rather just ask Elizabeth, is that not true? The board, the HPC, part of the applicant's presentation was the increase in the height of the roof and the slope of the roof. Is that not true?
That is true, during concept plan review and the formal application. However, with that said, I will say that they don't always, they try to consider everything possible, but someone in the public often will bring something to their attention that perhaps they didn't consider as strongly or overlooked.
Okay.
One of the examples would be that obelisk over there on the view down Green Street when they were looking at the bus shelter. They didn't consider that. They didn't think about that. So they do take comments from the public into consideration. But again, that was not offered to the public at our meeting, at our formal meeting. But
so a different question than what Steve asked, which is without you making a statement on the acceptability of the roof because it's not your place, is the overlooking or the unfortunate not hearing from the public before you folks made your decision, is that something that you believe warrants this application coming back to you? Because you have endorsed this application.
that's correct. Hard to say. Hard to say if they would reconsider that.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for answering that.
Hey,
Can I ask you just a slightly different way, Ms. Kim?
Well, hang on just one second, Stephen. Michael, are you finished?
Yeah, I am. That was basically my question. Because this application was endorsed at a hearing by the HPC, and this issue was part of it.
Okay, thank you. Stephen?
And that's the same point I wanted to make. That's the same question I wanted to ask is was the roof line considered? And you would say it was.
Yes, it was. It appears that it was.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
I have a question. Is there a procedure for the applicant to go back to HPC and say, please, we'd like to make comments and have you revisit the issue?
I mean, the applicant to go back and ask for a reconsideration?
Before the HPC, yes.
Yeah, okay. I would assume, and Elizabeth, you can comment on that. I mean, if the applicant chose to want the HPC to rehear it?
Well, I mean, of course, they can always come back, but I assume that they were happy with the endorsement they received.
I would think they would be. No, George, I understand what you're saying, but that would truly be up to the applicant.
Right. I mean, and HPC would be happy to listen to it again, but that would have to be.
I'll just say on behalf of the applicant that this was vetted extremely, and that there's would not be an interest in that.
I'm sorry, I meant to say not the applicant, but the objector, Ms. Vieira. If she were to go back to HPC and say, folks, you didn't listen to us, I want you to revisit this.
So if I can comment really quickly, I'm not trying to be difficult, and I'm sure that Lou and Jackie are really not happy with me right now, but I'm trying to, and I feel that I'm trying to kind of hold our standard. I mean, I was held to a standard. Everyone in our neighborhood was held to a standard. And I do feel that because our neighborhood is taking so much abuse between everything that's going on everywhere around us, if we don't hold to these standards, that it is a very slippery slope. And is there a way, I would ask of Jeff, who I know very, very well and have used in my own architecture, is there a way to do the back dormer without adding 2 feet to the front of the house? Is there a way to accomplish this without adding 2 feet of height to the house? And the only reason is because you all are attorneys, all of you. You all know the word precedence, and it all sets a precedent. And if, anyone could then come to you and say, you know what, this is great. Now I'm going to have a 3-story home instead of a 2.5-story home. Even changing the pitch of the roof line, if you go from this to this, it's a different style home. I mean, I'm not a study of architecture, but it's a different home.
Am I allowed to speak?
Yes. So, well, I just wanted to finish my thought, which is that the unfortunate thing about this application is that we were not, at that night, we had 3 other residents, not only myself, on the call, but we were not given an opportunity to speak. And so as a result, at this late hour, this issue has come up. And that's, I leave it at that. And again, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm only trying to I feel like, I'm speaking for the trees, like the Lorax, and trying to protect our neighborhood. That's all.
The current attic, it only has about 6 feet of headroom at its highest point. So it's really not habitable. So just adding a dormer out the back would not fix that. So that's why we're raising the roof. And it's not a 3-story house. It's a 2-story house with an attic, just like it was before.
And Jeff, just be clear, the attic in the after condition meets the definition of attic under Princeton's code, correct?
It's still an attic, yes.
Thank you.
Again, did you want to say something? Oh, okay.
I would just like to say that my recollection of the conversation with the HPC, initially in the concept review, and then again in the September application review, was that they were concerned initially because they didn't want the roof line to be changed. The roof line is not changing. It is staying at the exact same height. And if you try to look at this house from the front or the side on Edge Hill Street, because it is so narrow and there's so little side visuality to it, you don't really see this minimal and de minimis raise of the peak. It still looks, it looks from the front. If you look at the house now, it looks like it has a flat roof. And this probably will not, and I've been told it will not change that for this few inches, 1.5 feet, whatever it is, that the peak is changing, and the peak is towards the back end. So you're not seeing it, it's not up front. We're not actually raising the roof. And again, as Jeff said, this is still basically a dormer in an attic. It is not adding a 3rd floor. And that's just my understanding is the way the HPC looked at it after 2 meetings of consideration.
But the house will be 1.8 feet taller, correct?
Yes, that's correct. It'll still be under the 35-foot requirement in that zone.
Got it.
And building code and local code would still call that an attic.
And Jessica, you said in your commentary that this house would rise above the others near it.
It already does. If you stand there, it already does.
It's not even as high as the house, as the greenhouse to the
I think
side that is. It's just not. And they have the same exact situation with a dormer, as does the barracks, as does almost every other house on
again,
that.
the issue isn't the dormer. The dormer on the back we can't see. But what
my pitch is very flat.
The height from the windows to the beginning of the roof line.
Mr. Chair, I believe we had finished public comment. I just ask we've collected the comments here. I think it was abundantly clear that HPC opined on this. I just want to make sure that we're setting the proper stage for the decision that you will be making, that this was received by them, extensively reviewed at 2 meetings. The first meeting being, we want to see more information so we can understand how this roof pitch would work. And the second meeting being a receipt of that information and an understanding and an approval of that. So I just want to be absolutely clear about what HPC presented here and what they were presented with their recommendation.
Okay, thank you. All right, we are in fact done with the public portion. So we'll close the public portion of the hearing, and we will go into executive session in a minute, but Mr. Kennedy, do you want to say something?
Thank you. And thank you all for bearing with us tonight for a long evening. This is an applicant who has been waiting patiently, not tonight, but since an April concept review to be able to get the okay for these improvements and move forward with their home. It's been a long time coming, and I frankly think that we're actually very shortly at the end of the MLUL clock to deal with this, which is rare in Princeton. HPC looked at this extensively. In fact, while there was a lot of nuanced discussion about some details, this was essentially the thing that they agreed on, that amongst themselves, that was in fact de minimis and not visible from the street. I think with the weight of what HPC, what their recommendations mean and what would it mean to go against them essentially without any particular amount of evidence or recommendation. I think you also know what precedent means in a variance hearing, in that each application sits on its own laurels and its own merits and is viewed independently. This is not some slippery slope to the change of the street. What it would possibly be is a slippery slope of ignoring HPC's work towards a project. And I'll also finally say, I sat through that meeting. It was a great discussion. This was well included. In fact, the focus of it, including shots up and down the street to see from different angles to see how this looked, and finally the realization that it was not a significant change to the front at all, or anything that would be visible from the front angle, and acceptance and agreement on this. And I honestly heard the neighbors' objections that night, because she and Joe Butler and several other residents spoke about this. Was it just after this particular hearing ended? I guess, but well before these comments were written, and heard by the board and heard by me, and heard by you tonight. But ultimately, HPC has a recommendation, and I hope I don't have to say more than that. But this ultimately is a very simple project with very minor changes to this historic home that has been workshopped extensively for months and months and months. And while we talk about hardship in the traditional C1 sense, at some point, an applicant waiting for an approval becomes a different type of hardship. And I just ask that we put this one to bed this evening, no pun intended for the late hour. So thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Let's go into executive session now and discuss this. I would just like to ask one more time of Ms. Kim, what Mr. Kennedy's saying and what the applicant said was in fact what happened. Everything was considered and discussed. And the HPC did in fact vote to endorse the application.
So the applicant did present the raising of the roof, the concept plan, and it was discussed at their formal application. HPC had made their determination. However, the public was not heard until after the HPC had already made their determination. So the HPC chair memo is only written according to what they reviewed prior to it. And that's why The chair had apologized that she didn't give the public an opportunity and encouraged them to come to the zoning board to be heard. Because unfortunately, they had already finished the review of the application before the public was able to speak.
But it didn't change the recommendation.
They couldn't,
the-
because they already voted on it.
Okay. All right. Okay, board, Michael, please.
Yeah, just to chime in again, I have to admit, at times I sit in the audience of the HPC meetings. I was at that hearing. It was fully vetted. There is a mix of people that sit on that commission. They all endorsed and no one questioned or spoke against the roof line. None of them.
That's correct.
I mean, I'm looking at the drawing, both the existing and the proposed. And yes, in fact, the roof line is slightly taller, but I don't think it compromises the integrity of the structure. And it's within the allowable height. And it's still defined as an attic. Any other comments? Board members, questions?
I would
Move
just
we
say that,
approve the,
Wait, I'm sorry.
or I would just say, if you were to look at the actual pictures of the street and the houses along the
That's-
street.
we're in executive session, aren't we?
We're-
Yeah, I think we
Yeah,
are.
I'm not, I don't mean to cut you off, but we've heard the testimony and I think we all understand the situation. And this is our time to discuss the application. Go ahead, Stephen.
I think Donna wants to say something.
Oh,
Well, the question was, thank you. If it's still considered an attic, then indeed it is considered a 2.5-story structure, even with the roof line changes.
you're muted, Derek.
Yes, it's still an attic. I mean, it's falls under the definition of an attic. It's 2.5-story structure per our code.
Okay, thank you.
Stephen, anything else?
I don't want to preempt anyone.
Okay. Any other comments from any other?
Yeah,
board?
I just wanted to add, also, when I look at the additional streetscape photos, it does look to me like the other houses in the neighborhood have steeper than 5 and 12 pitches. You know, just an observation.
Yeah. Okay. Comments, any additional comments? Or if no one has any additional comments, if someone would like to make a motion.
I think before a motion's made, I just suggest that maybe we try to clarify maybe with Mr. Kennedy and Ms. Kim on what are the things that will go back, you know, as a condition. Because there's recommendations within the chairman's memo.
Sure. So the revisions to the front porch and the possible side lights, and there's a lot of confusion about this. When I say lights, I do not mean light fixtures with bulbs. I mean windows. Would I don't say go back, but would be worked out, whether it's an administrative thing or subcommittee. I just want to make sure it doesn't need to go back to a full board hearing. But those items, there was something in the memo and discussed, but I think out of confusion about lights as in sconces, and that's not on the table or something that the applicant is pursuing or frankly was pursuing then. So there's one light fixture that was shown for HPC that's under the excuse me, the portico, and the discussion was the glass potentially on the sides of the doors and a reconfiguration or redesign of the front portico. I believe those are the two items, Elizabeth, that would would essentially, have further review. Is that, do I?
Ryan, my understanding was that the applicant was interested in taking the ceiling light and putting wall mounted lights on there. And Jeff, maybe you could clarify, because I know that this came up.
No.
And you were the lighting.
I'll let Jeff convince everyone, but
I mean, we were okay with the ceiling one, but I thought it was presented at the meeting that the applicant was maybe considering putting house mounted lights on the sides of the door.
Yeah, no, I think there was some confusion there. So lights were referring to the windows on either
Side
side.
lights.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, well, then that's fine.
Okay.
So Ryan, just to clarify, I think it was a portico design, but really, which also included the stoop and the steps.
correct.
With this
Yep,
material,
yep,
right?
yep.
And I think we talked about the attic that, as of right, you can put that back in unless you want to put one in, but that's up to you.
I appreciate the flexibility on that, but at that location. So, thank you.
Okay, and I believe the applicant also agreed to shutter in place the shutter on the upper floor. That's going to be
Correct.
closet.
That's
Okay.
correct. That's correct.
Okay, Michael?
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay, once again, does somebody want to make a motion?
Yes, I'll move approval of the variances as requested in the application.
With the,
Sub-
with the
subject-
condition,
Subject to the conditions.
Yeah.
Hopefully Ms. Casey got them. But, just discussed between Ms. Kim and Mr. Kennedy. And I guess the condition, it always gets a little nebulous. It's not a condition that craters our approval. It's just that they'll endeavor to work together on it.
yes,
Yes, okay.
okay.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Any comment on the motion? Any discussion? Okay, Claudia, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Chen,
Yes.
Ms. Coulson,
Yes.
Mr. Davich,
Yes.
Mr. Floyd,
Yes,
Mr. Shriver,
Yes.
Mr. Stein,
Yes.
Chairman Cohen.
Yes,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you all. And we have nothing else to discuss this evening. We'll see you all next month.
when's,
you.
Wait,
when's
wait.
Prospect Tower Club coming back?
No idea yet.
Yeah, I
Okay.
was wondering about that too.
As Thanksgiving comes and.
I can speak to that, as discussed with the board last month, the changes discussed do involve redesign. So they are preparing significantly changed drawings. So I don't think it'll be a couple more weeks and likely a bit longer before you see that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Thanks, Steve.
Yes.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.
Night, everyone.
Hey.
Good job,